I like doing the
Plug her in.
Top it again, there we go, come on.
Okay, yes, I have, Kimberly Beaver, 5 Edgebrook Court, Middletown, and Beaver is B-E-A, V is Victor, B-R. First of all, thank you members for a little break. I'm sure everyone appreciated that. I do have testimony as well as documented photographs that I'd like to submit, and I did make copies for each of you as well as for the attorneys if I may distribute, and then I would somewhat need to describe them a little bit because we couldn't get an aerial view of what I'm going to talk about.
So, do you have a set for Mr. Junko? That's what we're going to do? Okay. So, first let him, let Mr. Junko just take a look. The relevancy is one thing, but let's establish a foundation. Did you take these photographs?
Yes, I did, as well as Jennifer Valencia has, I believe, 2 shots, and the other person whose property this is on was adjacent to mine did take the photographs, and she's here.
So
We're all here.
You took some of them.
Yes,
The other ones were taken by others.
yes,
And you are familiar with the area, so those are pictures of the site or other properties nearby, and you can identify them?
absolutely. It's my backyard in addition to views from my yard and the immediate neighbors on each side, yes.
I mean, basically, you witness can identify the photographs. So what we have them marked as those 12, and they are for whatever point and whatever word they are, whatever weight they have, it'll be up to the board. We'll mark one as 012. You can have 6. Oh, there are a lot, okay. So 012 is a series of photographs, and it consists of, if I'm correct, 13 pages, right?
That is correct.
So if you could, are they all of your yard?
They either are views from my yard looking in a certain direction or that direction looking towards my yard. Yes, except for there are 2 photos towards the back. The last 2, I believe.
There's someone's garage, is that?
Yes, that's part of, the area that this is covering basically is referring to McLeese Creek, which has to do what I'd like to tie into part of the McLeese Creek study and how it has been referred to as part of this case.
All right, so we're going to mark this as 012, and it consists of 13 sheets, okay, with some sheets having more than one photograph. So if you want to go through them and tell the board what they are,
Yes, if I may. Again, there are specific dates written on it, the first page and several of the issues that all show the water and the flooding. This was a storm that was nothing extraordinary, and it occurred on April 30th. The photos were taken prior to it getting dark. Unfortunately, as the darkness occurred, the water continued to rise, so we could not get better photographs. So I would ask you to keep in mind that it got even worse than what's documented. The environmental concerns is one of the main issues that I would like to speak to you about in the existing flooding problems that are there, and our concerns that where this is all downhill and where the creek or stream that's identified on the site merges with McLeese Creek, and this comes into right behind Arrowhead, and the area that we are in is Edgebrook Court. There are two adjacent cul-de-sacs, all that back up to McLeese Creek. So basically what's on page 1 that I'd like to use is it indicates the views as to which direction we're pointing. And the very first one, the slide, which is from Tilton looking towards our property across on Edgebrook, at that point, there was a 47-foot water flooding. And that was from the edge of the slide to the natural edge of the creek, the closest point to the creek. Then if you go to page 2, that shows two visions that are just further, if you will, down closer towards the site along McLeese Creek. And then actually page 3 is one that's even further down the very next road, which is actually directly across from Arrowhead. Then if you go to page 4, and what I would ask if you would, take page 4 and flip it back to page 1. Those are taken from exactly the same view under normal circumstances, which actually those photos, as is indicated on the document, says May 6th it was taken, compared to the evening prior to it getting heavy flooding. And the same thing if you take page 5 and 6, and you look again at page 1 and 2, you're getting the same view, but under normal circumstances. On page 6, again, comparing the natural creek from the vision of the slide, 47-foot flooding compared to just the normal 12-foot creek width. 11 natural creek width at the indication on the bottom of 6 that has the willow tree. Then if I can...
I have to ask, how did you get the flooding widths?
I actually went and I measured along with another person using a contractor's commercial 30-foot tape measure, and we had to keep on marking, moving to get the width, and it gets worse.
So you were waiting around?
Absolutely, literally with boots, literally, even in good circumstances. Then on page 7, this is actually taken directly from our yard, and it's difficult to see, but if you look towards the right about midway, that is a 3-foot chain link fence. McLeese Creek is just on the other side of that fence. So this is what we're using as, again, part of the study that has been referenced with the application is the McLeese Creek study and the sensitivity to McLeese Creek. Then once you turn to page 8, that shows you what happened again before dark. It got worse. And literally with the tape measure, when you compare the two properties that back up side by side, there was 130-foot water, which actually went even further off to the left-hand side of the page, plus the 11-foot creek, natural creek width, plus the 38-foot flooding over to the willow tree on the opposite side, which meant that creek at that photo was 179 feet wide, 16 times its normal state. This was again during an average rainfall. The concerns again go back to the site, the downhill part, the stream that feeds into McLeese Creek, which will again, once that disturbance happens, will offset this. And then when you go to page 9, again, this is looking towards Arrowhead, the opposite direction. When you turn to page 10, You can see again, this is further down, the width of this solid lake of water that occurred. Arrowhead, one of the homes literally had water in it, which is what you're seeing on page 11 that evening. Page 12 is actually a view from Arrowhead. You're seeing the cul-de-sac there on the right-hand side, looking back towards the water rising, how close it got to that home. And the last photo is not one that I took. This is taken by Mrs. Valencia. It actually, if you flip the page over, it's 47 Stavola, which is a home that is directly at the site property line, her backyard. So there's absolutely no disputing there is an existing water problem, not during an extraordinary type of rainstorm that occurs. So I don't have the photos available to look at, but what I recall from the engineer's proposals is the drainage basins are downhill on the site facing towards our direction, and then the, I'll call it the expel pipe, I'm not an expert at this, the expel pipe of those drainage basins are pointing again even more directly towards us. Where these streams merge, right behind Arrowhead to McLeese, which is where all of this flooding, and again, this is just a small snapshot of the type of flooding that exists. And I will also make a statement, we are not in a flood zone. This is just a normal overflow of the creek from water problems that exist, and again, also from underground springs that exist that are all over this area. Part of my also concerns on the site is the word itself, wetlands. That to me says that there are going to be issues. Water can only go so far when it's already wet and there's already underground creeks and streams that exist. There's a limitation, and again, this is only my personal opinion, but it seems common sense. There's limitations to how much water and where you can put it and how it could not possibly affect other parts of the area. So basically, my bottom line statement that I like to make is this simply is not a suitable site for a school campus, and all of the auxiliary structures that are proposed in the application of this magnitude and the intensity of disruption that it will make to not only the road itself of Chapel Hill with all of the other statements that have been made, especially Mr. Short and the items that he addressed, as well as the land itself. So that pretty much is what I wanted to discuss on the water issues and the concern of the individuals that, again, this is just a small snapshot in just an area that would be immediately affected by this. The other concerns that I would like to address are multiple. And before I start this, I want to make a statement, and no way am I making statements that are taken to say anything negative about an individual or to discredit an individual. I just have concerns as to statements that have been made that are part of the public record, either that are part of public places that these records have been posted, such as websites, or also that are actual statements made in a very, very public setting overheard by many others as witnesses. I have concerns as I have no other word to use except for the deceptive nature, starting with the very first thing that started was the application, and on their own website, they were seeking supporters. And those supporters, in their petition, to summarize, basically referenced that a rock quarry could be built there, or that 300 homes, and they did reference low income, and again, this was posted right on their website, and that basically summarizing that we as a school would be a much better alternative than these other two possibilities of things that could be built there. So that to me was very deceptive in nature, that was put out publicly on their own website. I have some other issues about the things that have somewhat been brought up, but it almost appears somewhat evasive as to what seems like incredibly important, critical information, such as from the engineer, such as from the traffic reports, etc., that there seems to be information lacking. And again, this has somewhat been addressed by others, so I won't go into that a whole lot. And again, non-inclusive details seem to be missing, which again, this is starting to be addressed. The one thing that has completely been left out, when it's been referenced in prior meetings about accidents, the number of accidents that have physically been reported on Chapel Hill Road. And if I recall, it was 130 some total that they referenced directly to Chapel Hill Road. The part that was not addressed is, what about all of the accidents that were not reported? And we all know that those far exceed, that number will strongly go up than the 130 some that are listed, that were not made a formal police report. I had great concerns over the engineer talking about data, again, having to do with the water and referencing data that was approximately 8 years old. I also have an issue with a statement made in a very public setting, which happened to be at my place of work, where a member of the applicant, who is a very strong member of the application, came to me and publicly made a statement heard by many that...
I was going to say, you're going to talk about the application, please. If you want to attack the individuals, do that on your own.
I am not at all attacking individuals.
Stop. You know, again, statements made by others outside of this meeting room cannot be repeated here. The strict rules of evidence don't apply, but there has to be some limit on what's acceptable testimony. So if someone says something, you can't come in here and say, I heard somebody say something.
Okay.
Okay?
It was said directly to me, but that's okay with others hearing it as a witness. Is it possible to ask the board a question? It's come up many times. The 300 condos that would be built if the school is not built there by the applicant. Is there a way to address that and ask, is that ever possible to be an approved type of structure?
First of all, there's nothing about that in the record, and really questions aren't directed to the board. But it's zoned the way it's zoned, and an applicant can seek use variance approvals or do different things. So who knows what can be done there, other than what it's zoned for, and that's about the only thing that the board could ever speculate on or compare it to.
Okay. The other thing that has slightly been addressed is the construction vehicles and the type of roads that do exist, how they are scenic roads. They are certainly not highways. They're not a Route 35 type of highway. They have a very small bridge. If this application is approved, there will be, by the own engineer's testimony, at least a year plus just for phase one. Then we're talking about phases in the future. We are talking years of construction vehicles, which is, again, of great concern. So pretty much, I do thank you for listening to mine as well as everyone else's concern. I do urge you to consider the irrevocable damage to the environment that will absolutely occur to this specific site and to the immediate area. Once ground and they start phase one, there's no going back. No going back to fix what's going to happen to that land. A project of this magnitude on top of wetlands and the environmentally sensitive and the site improvements that are proposed, it's been addressed how many times. This land is incredibly sensitive. It's been addressed as part of the town plan. The master plan has also been addressed as part of the McLeese Creek that's been brought up. Not even mentioning what's going to happen to the effect of the septic, the wells, and the people who, that's their sole source of water and balance that would do. So the voters are going to rely on you to have responsibility to preserve and to protect them, do the best interest to the town as well as to the taxpayers. So again, I thank you for listening.
You've been up before, right? You're sworn.
Yes, ma'am.
Your name and address, just for record.
Bradley Baptista, Baptista, 651 Kings Highway East. As a voting tax-paying resident of Middletown, I have concerns about the plan to build a school on Chapel Hill Road. As a child, I attended a private Catholic school that was not co-ed, as did my wife, and we both greatly value education and will emphasize it with our child. We don't oppose the building of another private school in Middletown if it's truly warranted, given given the many already in existence, but we do strongly question the location that is being proposed for a number of reasons. Safety, traffic, taxes, and the accuracy of the submitted proposal thus far. For the Trinity Hall proposal, an old survey from 2006 was used. How much has changed in the past 7 years? Would you use old scans from 7+ years ago if you had cancer to determine your current condition? Very important point to know, right? 5 years ago, during the lowest point of the real estate decline, we purchased our home here in Middletown. We weighed all options carefully, and after much thought and planning, we chose the Chapel Hill area because of its historic significance, beautiful farms and countryside, and quiet residential community. Every resident we met assured us that they leap of faith in buying into their community during one of the worst economic downturns my generation has ever seen. All this is now being threatened by the proposed commercial development of a school, and the historic beauty will forever be lost. Ideally, I would love for that land to stay as picturesque as it is today. However, I understand that we don't live in an ideal world, and the property owner has the right to sell if it works out for them. However, 19 houses on the same property is a much more viable and profitable alternative for both Middletown and its residents, since taxes garnered from those houses would benefit the town as well as keep the taxes for the rest of the residents from rising. Having attended multiple of these meetings and doing my due diligence as a Middletown resident, here's a list of some of my concerns. To start off with, the Trinity Hall engineer, when discussing his proposal in the March meeting, blatantly lied under oath about the environmental impact study. First, he had no idea who actually wrote it. And then when one of the attorneys pointed out that it had his name on the cover page, all of a sudden he remembered that he had written it. How can you forget writing something as extensive and impactful as this, especially when you're here to testify about the same property? And that document was submitted as part of the case. If he can forget something as basic as this, it begs the question, what else has been forgotten when developing this proposal, and how easy is it going to be to rectify this? The Trinity Hall engineer wasn't qualified to do an environmental impact study. He didn't even walk the entire site in 2013. By his own admission under oath, when he supposedly did the study. How can we consider anything in this report to be currently accurate? Yet we're asking you to vote, they're asking you to make decisions based on that. One of the previous speakers referenced desktop engineering, and there was a change to the driveway by approximately 60 feet or something to that effect, I believe. I can understand. So my foot is my right foot is exactly 1 foot inside. We can walk this and measure the 60 feet. The reality of it is, I can understand, and I think most people could understand, a foot, 2 feet, 3 feet, maybe 5. But an error of 60 feet and not seeing a driveway, it's not a mouse on the side of the road, it's a driveway. How could you not see a driveway that is 60 feet away from your home? Unless you never actually walked the site or actually saw it or bothered to take proper notes. That concerns me. When I asked the Trinity Hall engineer how many other similar developments he had planned and seen through to fruition, he said there were dozens, yet he couldn't even name one of them. I find it hard to believe that a professional in any field is unable to recall what should be some of their most notable projects. If roles were reversed, I would have been able to proudly name at least a few. It speaks to reputation and experience. By wanting to show my customers and the world that I have the necessary experience to design and implement the project correctly, and maybe even deal with unexpected issues. In addition, successful projects bolster my professional reputation, which is one of the most valuable calling cards in any profession. The fact that the Trinity Hall engineer was unable to name even one speaks very loudly to both his experience and reputation, or lack thereof. The reason for raising this concern is simple. How do we know that he has the skill set, knowledge, and experience to correctly design this project and address all potential issues? If he doesn't, we could be dealing with plan modifications en masse, and an end result, which if presented at this point in time, could potentially be grounds for not approving the project in the first place. The response I received in the past regarding his qualifications was that he is licensed by the state of New Jersey, which to me means that he has studied and understands engineering principles and the law around the design requirements. It speaks nothing of the valuable experience he will bring to the table and the ability to see pitfalls in a design based upon that experience. As I mentioned during that exchange, just because an individual is granted a driving license by the state of New Jersey, it doesn't mean that they're not going to make mistakes or have an accident. Would you allow a brand new licensed driver with no experience to drive the school bus that your precious child is on? I know I wouldn't, because I understand the value of experience. Trinity Hall claims that this school will service the Middletown community, but they didn't even bother to put a sidewalk in their plan, which means one of two things. They didn't expect any students from the immediate neighborhood, or very poor planning. Why would you force students within walking distance to take a bus or have to be driven when they can easily walk to school in a few minutes? It appears to me that they're deliberately trying to keep the neighboring Middletown residents from becoming students by forcing them to be driven, or worse, further congest our streets with buses to pick up students who are well within walking distance, in some cases potentially less than 200 feet away. I'm deeply concerned that if it's poor planning for something as basic as sidewalks to get children to school, what else have they missed on the more complicated and critical plans like water, flooding situation, or the traffic study? There were comments earlier about the feasibility study, which was for a new private Catholic all-girls high school for Monmouth County, not just Middletown. According to the feasibility study, ideally the school would be centrally located in Monmouth County in a town such as Leonardo. That's their own study that they commissioned, which is in fact suggesting that it would be in Lincroft, not Middletown. The feasibility study was based...
You are aware that Lincroft is a village.
The feasibility study was based upon 2,000 survey responses, and there were a total of 11,700 distributed. And I know this was said before, 18% responses. However, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, there is an estimated population in Middletown County in 2010 of 630,000 plus. That means in this study, we're basing it upon the responses from 0.33%. That is 0.33 of 1%. Right? For a population that large. I have the statistics if you need that. It's the U.S. Census Bureau number. If you'd like a printout, I can give it to you.
You said Middletown County, you meant Monmouth County population, 615,000.
I'm sorry, Monmouth County.
615,000? No one's arguing.
Yeah. So according to the feasibility study, there's an expected decline of 13% in female school-age residents between 2008 and 2028. Now if you add to that the the private school enrollment statistics by the U.S. Department of Education. I have that printed, I will give it to you now.
First, you have to give it to Mr. Johnson. Okay, you guys, if you're going to talk off the record, this may be the most important stuff, and you're going to miss it.
Is your client too, Mr. Gabriel?
Say it in the mic, please.
I comment on this, just that I think it was going to be used, it's going to have to be questioned because there are a lot of issues in this.
Do you have other copies? Or just the
I have two.
Could the board see
Not enough for everyone.
Could you just maybe share? I mean, let's just see what it is. You have no copies? Yes. It's a report by IES, Institute of Education Sciences. And it's a couple of pages from a report. On the bottom it says U.S. Department of Education.
It's just a comment on the cover. It didn't even written on the report.
You know what?
Jim, I can tell you that I know this Center for Education Statistics, that's a valid source.
I mean, it says on the front, U.S. Department of Education. So this one here, the gentleman handed it, has writing on it, so let's read that back. I mean, that's, why don't we mark this as 013?
I can give you the website.
You know, I know the website.
The board will mark this as 013, and then we'll go from there. We have some extra copies, and if you have two more, give it to the rest of the board members. Mr. John, out of copies?
I don't have enough.
No.
That's all.
Yeah, the board can share. So book 13 is this, it's page 50 and 51 of the Condition of Education 2013 with the U.S. Department of Education noted on the bottom left. Okay, what is this?
All right, so according to the feasibility study, there was never
First, what is
plan.
First, what is it?
This is projected private school enrollment. If you look at it,
Okay, and where did you get it from?
from their website, I can give you the website, if you like the website.
You got it from the Department of Education website?
And, you know, hold on. It is nces.ed.gov.
And this is a portion of a report on their website.
Correct, the 241-page report. I did not have enough paper on my printer to print out all the 241 pages.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
according to the feasibility study, we talked about a 13% decline. When we add this private school enrollment statistics, the condition of education 2013, you see the private school enrollment has declined to the tune of over 12.5% between 2001 and 2010. The combination of both these statistics paints a bleak picture for the future sustainability of a new non-accredited $17,000 a year all-girls. One of the board members at one of the previous meetings counted one of the witnesses stating an increase in enrollment at one of the other Catholic schools, but offered no proof or statistics to back it. It's exactly what this is. This validates what one of the witnesses, the early witnesses, has said. And my one request to the board is, if you're encountering a witness, I think the same rules should apply to you as far as having, concrete proof to counter that witness. Right? If we have to be subjected to it, then I think you should as well.
Who is you? The board?
Correct. I can repeat that if you'd like.
Does this report refer to parochial schools run by a parish and does not include a diocese or an independent school?
Well, if you look at it.
Perhaps if you look at page 50.
Sure. It has Catholic, non-sectarian, conservative, Christian, affiliated, unaffiliated. Which one are you? Okay.
And if you look at page 50.
And obviously there's no specifics on independent. However, this refers to private in general, which you will fall under, correct?
Wouldn't you want to represent to the board that independent schools are excluded from this study?
That's good job, right? Good job, the council.
No, it's not.
Okay, so
Fair.
fair enough. At no point have I stated that it represents independent. I said private. If you go through, read that back, I said private. I never said independent or otherwise.
Okay, but the point is, if you're going to get up and give a report in, Mr. Junko's got the right to cross-examination, and you've got to answer his question.
And I did.
Well, it kind of got a little beyond.
It was fine.
Well, I'd have to make the question more specific. Does the report say that this study was due to a decline in the number of students enrolled in parochial schools, those run by a parish, not by a diocese or independently? Simple yes or no? I direct your attention to page 50, left-hand column,
Sure.
4 lines from the bottom.
Okay, great. Yeah, that only talks specifically the decrease in Catholic schools. There's other components in there, if you look at it, like I said, there's 4 different categories that are represented, which in their opinion represents the volume of private schools. Again, I went to private schools, I'm not referring to independent. I'm just giving you the statistics that could potentially be simple as that.
Okay, the board has it, whatever it's worth, the board got it, the board can review it, and if it's relevant in your board's decision, that'll be up to the board.
So, taxes. The reason for questioning the sustainability and feasibility is that if the school fails, we will have lost the taxes of nearly $500,000 a year from potential residential development of the property. This tax relief would benefit all Middletown residents, not just the Chapel Hill area. And there are plenty of other more suitable commercial sites, as other people have here alluded to, across Monmouth County, which would, some of which already have developments on them that would better serve the schools.
May I make a comment, just as I understand the law? This board cannot consider tax rateables or revenue as part of its decision. So whether or not something is a tax exempt or taxable, or a big rateable or a small rateable, is not something this board can recognize in its decision-making process. But that's just the law.
And I understand that, but isn't this board's job also to analyze the overall impact to the area and the community?
I'm just saying, because a number of people, I'm not picking on, a number of people have talked about the tax benefits or the tax consequences and all that. That's not a relevant consideration. I'm just advising my clients. That's just not a relevant consideration for the board. And hopefully other people then can pick that up and not keep on talking about it, because it's not relevant. Not to this board. It may be relevant to you as a taxpayer, it's just not relevant under the law to the planner.
Now on to the road. Right? The traffic study was performed on Jan 28, 2014. Right? That's never been out. The report contains multiple misguiding items that need to be pointed out. On page 5, it states, the sight lines along Chapel Hill Road at the driveway are not obstructed given the straight alignment of the roadway. This conveniently fails to mention that the line of sight is only good for about 100 feet when looking towards Kings Highway East. This is due to the elevation of Chapel Hill Road. All you need to do to validate this is drive there and stand by the proposed entrance, or simply drive down Chapel Hill Road from Kings Highway East towards Route 35. There are spots in the road where you cannot see beyond the rise ahead of you, and there is potentially a car or an individual on that road. Many a time I've seen joggers where as you reach the crest and you are 20 feet away is when you can, the only time you can actually spot the individual on the road. To me, that is a very dangerous condition. I suggest that the committee, if you're not familiar with it, but every member take a walk down there or drive down there to familiarize yourself with that specific danger and the conditions around that problem. The traffic study references that the counts were conducted the week of January 27, 2014, which makes it seem like a week-long study. However, if you review Appendix D, which is the traffic volume data, etc., you can see that the study was performed on just one day, Jan 28. Based upon the weather data for the month of January, and I have a printout, it's AccuWeather, it's a website, and I have no affiliation to it. And I can show you a copy reserved for you.
Are you up here to that?
Sure.
Do we have any 30 or 40?
Amen. He's referring to the flooding. It was a joke. I have to identify his jokes for you. My boyfriend.
A little jocularity doesn't work. Yeah.
None of us are going to the improv after this. Can we stipulate that January was winter time, and it was cold, and it snowed, and things like that? I mean, what do we see in the plane?
I can stipulate that.
It was a snowy winter, and it might have snowed around then, so we're gonna have to mark it. This is 014. This is from,
I mean, the evidence should have some basis for objection or something.
you know, we're starting to argue issues beyond anything that may be material to the board. The board's going to have to decide whether or not the weather on a day in January, when the traffic counts were taken, is somehow material to the board's decision. But if we're going to, I mean, it's here, it's been referred to, the gentleman has it, spending more time arguing about it than probably it is worth. What's 014? You pulled this off of the AccuWeather website?
Yes.
Today, recently?
This is full of,
A month ago. And you went back and checked the weather for,
that's January. That data's not changed. That's historic data that's on that website. So we can go back now and pull it up and do the same.
and for what location? Middletown, New Jersey? Okay, so your point is that on what day?
So, you with me? So, we're saying, based upon the weather report for the month of January, between the 21st and the 28th, there was almost a foot of snow. With the high temperature, with the high temperature, most of those days staying below freezing, that means that little of that snow had actually melted. So the traffic study was conducted when there's approximately a foot of snow on the ground, right? In addition to a low temperature on Jan 28th of just 12 degrees. These conditions would definitely have affected the volume of traffic, and any real expert or conscientious entity would have performed a follow-up analysis during a different time to validate that this was not an anomaly. What about the impact of joggers and bicyclists that frequent these roads? Do you really think they were out there on January 20th in the freezing cold and foot of snow? But as a resident,
There's a foot of snow, not a road.
well,
Middletown's roads are plowed.
yes, if you haven't been down that road, there is no sidewalk, there's no place for joggers to run, and there's no place for cyclists.
Disputing it, because you're making it sound like there's a foot of snow.
Apologies. When there's a foot of snow on the side of the road.
What day was the traffic count taken?
28. So read
What were the temperatures on the 28th?
low was 12.
The 21 and 12 refers to the 27th, to the 28th? Excuse me, it's right here. That's not, there's nothing listed. I'm just saying, it happens to be on this, there's no temperature. Okay.
Sure. If you look right over here, this is the 28th. You have these 3 dates here. Okay, here it is. Yeah, this is the 28th right here. Okay.
So as I said before, it was cold, right? And the day before was 48 degrees.
Agreed, this is from the high for that entire period, right?
What's the point? Yeah. What's the
The
point?
point is that when we went through the traffic,
That wasn't for you.
the point is that when the traffic impact study was taken, it was at a point when there was almost a foot of snow on the ground, right? Which is not normal conditions. It doesn't have, you don't have joggers, you don't have bicyclists, you don't have the same volume of traffic that you typically would. There's a lot of people that, believe it or not, do stay home when it's snowing.
Can you show where that shows?
On the 21st, it snowed 10 inches.
Where's Mr. G? Get Mr. G in here.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you mentioned-
No.
Spread out on 10.
But between the 21st and the 28th, if you look at the temperatures, that would indicate that most of that was still active on that, right?
Yeah, but, you know, come on, I'm here for the board. It's time. We're talking about weather conditions in January. It was known when the gentleman came up and gave his report that it was January. To argue now, back 3 months ago, that when he got up, his report's not accurate because it was winter, we're not getting it.
I'm not saying it's not accurate because of winter, I'm questioning the validity of the report based on the conditions at the time, because those are not normal conditions, that's what I'm saying. Simple. Right, I live there, I know what normal conditions
The
are.
question is, why wasn't each question at that time 3 months ago?
Because I was not aware of the hearings at that point in time, and I believe that that specific hearing, I was in a business conference in Florida.
But in order to draw conclusions from what you want the board to draw, you have to be able to say, as a traffic engineer, that traffic varies because of weather.
So,
And you have to say that January was not representative of traffic on Chapel Hill Road.
all right, the last I understood of the comments section is that I'm allowed to speak and express my concerns. I am not questioning the traffic expert at this point. I am making comments
But
about
this is a Batista, right?
Baptist, that's fine.
Good.
Baptist, B-A, yeah, no matter.
But
You can call me Bradley.
But things have to be relevant, okay? And we're going down an alley here that probably isn't worth all the board's time. Not at this point in time, in the proceedings. There's a long line of people behind you, And we're talking about weather on a day in January, 5 months ago.
Well, I think it's completely material to the traffic report and the.
Make your point, make your point.
Okay, keep going. All right. The point in question, there would have been no joggers, there would have been no bicyclists.
That's the best.
All right, well, kind of focus the students. All right, what about commercial traffic? The landscapers, the contracting business, where's all that? None of that's been added in. Anyone who really was concerned about a genuine traffic report would have done multiple studies, not just the one. Right? I'll move on now. What about the traffic flow on the trunk roads, like Kings Highway East, Route 35? Do we even know what route this traffic will take? Right? How will it plug these arteries? We know nothing about that. And there's no study based that we can reference that tells you what the impact is going to be, right? Now, the modified plan calls for 100 feet of extra traffic lane to permit a dedicated turning lane for entry into the school. The traffic expert pointed out the deficiency in such a short lane. Should the proposal be approved, who will pay for the inevitable extension of that lane when the expert prediction is realized? Middletown resident taxi, right? So in addition to making this road more dangerous with the addition of hundreds of inexperienced drivers to the existing legion of potholes, bad sight lines, low fog visibility, and hilly terrain, we're now going to expect Middletown residents to take on the additional tax burden for this non-community serving school. I've heard residents on multiple occasions during these planning board meetings question the after hours or weekend events, lights and PA system, etc. On all occasions this was brought up. It was brushed aside on the grounds that Trinity Hall had not submitted any plans and did not intend to have such events. According to the Trinity Hall website, however, their anticipated athletics program calls for competing at junior varsity and varsity level in year 3, which is 2015-2016. Junior varsity and varsity means competing against other schools and is held at various times, including weekends and weekends.
I think they stipulated they were going to have interscholastic sports. And I'm sure that's in the record.
Okay, I don't recall hearing that.
That's in the record.
Yes, it's in the record, and
Okay.
the main thing about that, no speakers and words.
Right. So they're going to have sports against other schools.
Congratulations, and ceremonies, just like every other school. Not a big difference in other high schools.
No, but rather than belabor, they are going to have sports with other schools.
Excellent. Now that he mentioned that, not going to be different than the high school. The same holds true for other events, such as music concerts and dance shows. I have a copy of the Red Bank Catholic School schedule for the month of May, if you'd like to look at it.
I don't think that's going to be relevant at all.
It's off of their website, and he just said it's the same as other schools, hence, hold on, I'm not done yet. If you look at it, they have weekday evening events from 7:30 to midnight. Do we really expect Trinity Hall, who is going to be competing for the business of the same students, to be any different? After all, it is a business, right?
Do we can't refer to Red Bank Catholic schedule, but I think it's going to be stipulated that they are planning to have other events, because that's what schools do. Whether they have as many as Red Bank Catholic or as few as somebody else, or more than this,
The point is that they do have after-hours events.
stipulated. Right, Mr. Jones?
The school will have after-hours events, we'll have some concerts, we'll have the assemblies, we'll have lectures, and all those kinds of things that anyone would expect in
It's going to be a school.
Thanks. Now, based specifically on that, what's going to be the impact? When they have events, they have concerts, they have anything else, they have 500 parking spots. What about the grandparents that want to visit for those events? What about the friends and the relatives and the other supporters who want to show up and show their support? Great to know, I'm sure. But where are all those people going to fit? Where are we going to fit that volume of people?
What volume?
The people that show up for their concerts and their events.
What's the number?
There's 500 parking spots. You have 2 parents per student. And and you have approximately 2 parents per child. Assume that one parent is driving the child to school, the other parent has to come in a separate car. As simple as that. Like I said, what about grandparents? What about friends and family?
Yeah, great-grandparents.
Those are not associated with us.
500 parking places on the site.
Yeah,
You can't park on Chapel Hill Road.
correct.
Why? Because it's
So,
dangerous.
whatever-
But you can park past the school. You can park on all those roads back there. You can park on Mohegan Court. You can park everywhere else where they.
I know you're trying to make points, but you have to recognize that you have to make points that are going to be relevant to the proceeding.
Okay.
The applicant, let me finish. The applicant, I don't really know. The applicant, in response to various objections about number of parking, increased the number of parking spaces, and they're above the ordinance standard. Okay, so they're going to have cars, and graduation, they'll probably be parking on
Why does he
the
keep
grants.
the yard?
This is the way it is.
Maybe.
They're a school. So make your points,
And
but
are they agreeing to park on
please,
the grass?
but if you were an attorney, what I'd say to you is make your best points.
Excellent.
Okay? And if you're not an attorney, I say to you, make your best points.
I'm not an attorney. I'm trying to make my best.
But you can make your best points. So make your best points.
They're
All
good
right.
points.
Now, according to that same traffic impact study, they estimated that 225 students will arrive to and from the school by bus, right? However, for their own website, that's inaccurate. According to this, they expect the majority of the students to be driven until their enrollment grows substantially.
Is there something that says that?
Hold on, everyone, hold on. Like I said, to this side of the room, I want to say to this side of the room. We don't want to hear it. Let the person speak. They have to be respectful of the people at the podium, please.
With all due respect, there has to be some relationship to the actual facts of the case.
That's fine. Then you can stand up and say something, or then somebody else can come up and say something. We don't want to hear people in the background.
I don't think we're doing anything. And for the
Come on. I said it to them, I said it to them. That's it. We don't want to hear any comments in the background. Go on, Mr. Batista, please.
Okay,
Did you pull something up your website? And,
I unfortunately only have one copy, but it's off their website.
well, why don't you give it to Mr. Jones? Well, before we start talking about it, let's just...
We're taking more time on these.
Yeah, it's a very confusing relationship between the document and the matter asserted. So yes, it is on the website, but I'm not sure, I don't know
All right,
where.
we're going to mark it as 050, it's a portion of something from the Trinity website.
Right, it's their transportation.
So when you're done, you're going to have to hand it in, we're going to mark it as 050.
Yes. So according to this, it says, until our enrollment grows substantially in the coming years, doesn't have to take on, a majority of school districts will likely opt to provide reimbursement for students attending private school in lieu of providing busing. That speaks for itself. They themselves are expecting that the majority of the school districts will not provide busing and that they will be getting reimbursement, which means that they will be driven there in private cars or taxis or whatever else. But they will not be bused, as for their own record, what the traffic study, which says that 225 students will be bused, right? Just pointing out inconsistency.
I have to comment on the veracity of that statement. It talks about the opportunity for busing and the opportunity, the obligation of the state for reimbursement.
It talks about Trinity Hall anticipating that the school district will choose not to bus those students and therefore not to
Speaks for
reimburse them.
itself.
It's fine.
Right? In addition, they expect students from Middletown and Ocean counties to come to the school, which we're talking in a lot of cases in excess of an hour's travel one way if you're traveling. So what are we going to be looking at next? Boarding? The thought.
Nothing to do with this application. Go on.
It's overstated. They're overstated.
It's on their website. It's on the
You're
page.
overstating what you're saying.
It doesn't say it's going to be a boarding school.
It doesn't say it.
I said it's a concern, a comment. I'm not saying it states on their website. It's the Ocean River
How much more do you have?
page.
Okay.
All right. I think the most important thing for us to remember at this point is to pay attention to what was submitted, but to carefully analyze what was not submitted. It stands to reason, and is common practice, that if something were to have a negative effect on their case, then Trinity Hall would not submit it. Case in point, the feasibility study. If they really wanted to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that there would be no home value impact, why didn't they perform an analysis and have one or multiple experts testify to that effect? The only conclusion that can be drawn is that they believe that values will go down and could not find an expert to state otherwise. They tried to hide that behind validations of neighborhoods with schools, but none of those is even remotely comparable. All comparisons were of schools that have either been in place for many years or were in their location prior to the residential development around them. The key point that they have not established and have tried to circumvent is that there is no submitted analysis of real estate values before, during, and after the building of a school in a residential area, period. So they've conveniently left that critical piece of evidence out of their case, and by doing so, I'm going to make this board the scapegoat should the proposal and the inevitable property value decline be realized. I know you said it's not this board's concern, but I'm voicing my concern. And specific to that, it impacts all of Middletown, not just Chapel Hill, because based on property value decline and the reassessment of the tax values of the properties that go down, that tax deficit has to be made up by somebody, which means it will be distributed across the rest of Middletown. Right? Now, my big question to everybody is, and that's not to you, that's to everybody in this room. When was the last time you actually visited Chapel Hill? When was the last time you drove down those roads, saw what it was like, saw how dangerous those turns were, saw what the traffic was like, and how easy it is to have an accident? I know people have brought it up. I know the first speaker spoke about the child who had a fatal accident. I see that picture on that tree every day when I drive down that road. And I fully understand the impact that can have on a family. And I urge everyone to think about that fact when they're making their decision. Now, if you review the points that I've raised and that other people here have raised, you will see a systemic pattern of deception that Trinity Hall has used throughout their proposal in an attempt to deceive not just this board, but to all Middletown residents. We don't have a final proposal as yet. We've had continuous inconsistencies in all the stuff that's been submitted, including the driveway situation, which you obviously know. And they want you to be the scapegoat to make a decision based on incomplete and inaccurate information. Thank you for your time, and I just want to remind you that I believe it's this board's duty to protect the interests of Middletown above everything else. So I urge you to remember that when you vote, and please vote no. Thank you.
Have you been up before? Okay. Your name and address, please. Please raise your right hand. Swear to testify that you will do something God. Thank you. You're going to have to pull the mic down. It's not going to pick you up unless you can tilt it. That'd be good.
Okay?
That's good.
Just keep your
Head over that way? Okay. Okay, there we go, okay. Tell back the follow-up. Okay. Good evening and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I have lived here in Middletown my whole life. When we moved in here in 1960, almost no major development had happened yet. Highway 36 was a two-lane dirt road. There was an incredible silence then at night with almost no traffic lights, and summers were spent running through adjoining neighborhoods in the warm darkness, taking advantage of that incredible freedom that came from the lack of traffic in my neighborhood. In those days, the food service clown turned around. We used the Kingsburg Middletown National Bank. Everything was new. There was open land and trees everywhere. Businesses were by people, not by corporations. I remember Louis Tulip on Highway 35 with its vast green lawns and the giant cup that would be decorated for the holidays. I remember Old Wagon Farm, also on Highway 35, with all the trees and apples and trees. And this was the view that people got as they entered Middletown. This is what strangers would use to garner an opinion of who we were as a people.
They were home though.
That's what we
I worked there.
When you're little, it's all
I
relative.
learned how to speak Spanish.
When you're little, it's all relative. All you see is from the back of 64 Chevy that the world is a broad place. This is what we call home. That open land is gone now and forever. The trees and the fresh fruit and the fresh pressed cider are all gone and will never come back. There is no undoing those decisions, nothing left to share with the kids we have now. We can only describe the taste of that fruit, only have them imagine the smell and the texture of that fresh pressed cider. So good those small cups on the trip desert. So precious for those moments.
You need to slow down. Just,
I'm really nervous. My throat's
I understand that everybody does it when they're reading. Just watching her fingers and they're falling off.
In the 90s, I lived at 126 Woodgate Road in Kings Valley, a stone's throw from the land where the school was planned. We fought water all the time, all the time. Our basement was constantly wet. Even on sunny days, the sump pump was going. One winter it was so bad, we were literally putting quick-read up and trying to pass overflowing water, coming in for the entries to our basement windows. In that neighborhood, we all talked about water as if it were a person, an unwelcome relative to be managed, or better yet, kicked out as an unwelcome guest who would stay too long. In 2005, I moved to Crestview Drive. I now travel Chapel Hill Road every day to take my daughter to her special needs program at Needham School. Rather than the flow of water, I am now dealing with the flow of traffic. To avoid the turnarounds at Chapel Hill and Highway 35, and at 35 and Apple Farm Road, people enter my street. We've seen people make so many U-turns so often in the Crestview Farms parking lot that we have dubbed it the Crestview Farms U-turn. Even the Jitney bus for the Senior Citizens Week Fair in the strip mall across the street uses my street rather than the proper turnaround. There are mornings when there is so much traffic backed up to the light that I can't make the left out of Dannemar safely to get my daughter to school. And the people who cut through my street impatiently, and I say impatiently because if they were patient, they would take the turnaround instead. Impatiently move forward after barely stopping for the stop sign at the end of Dannemar, and look at me like there's something wrong with me because I want to make a proper left-hand turn out of the end of my street. On the topic of traffic, in one of the earlier meetings, several of the members of the planning board expressed concern over the additional buses and cars that the school will generate, and they asked for a realistic view of what traffic is going to be like in that area. It was also asked about, they've also asked questions about the front end and whether there would be a danger that would be presented by those who are trying to pass on the right-hand side. I ask all of you to revisit those early concerns that you had for this application and really truly ask yourselves if they were addressed by subsequent testimony. I ask you to listen to the concerns of those of us who will be living in the construction of this building and watching the destruction of our building, and ask yourselves if this is what best for the majority of the people who live in our town. Do you really feel a single day of monitoring traffic without any attention to the impact at the intersection of Highway 35 and Chapel Hill Road gives you a realistic view? I ask, do you really think that any number of impatient drivers on the road, that there will be no passing on the right-hand shoulder in front of the school? You've already acknowledged before that speeding can be a problem on Chapel Hill Road. So how does adding more cars and buses alleviate the issue? As our representatives, as the people we trust as elected officials to appoint to take care of us, I ask you to consider this deep and abiding responsibility you you've been given and ask you to truly consider if voting yes for this application serves the need of the greater good you've been entrusted to protect. I ask you to consider the longevity of the impact this will have on all of us, not only here in this room, but for generations to come. I ask you to consider the legacy you are leaving on that land, in that place, and what you will be empowering these people to take away from us. I ask you to consider all that we will lose and not ever be able to recover if this happens. I ask you to determine whose needs you are truly fulfilling and whose legacy you are helping to establish. As a woman and as a mother to 3 girls, I would not look to this school for my children. In my opinion, single-sex schooling is outdated, and yet we allow it to continue. The young women graduating from this institution, in my opinion, will be no more in a position to compete than any young woman coming out of any education and from any background. And why? Because of the existence of all-male schools like CBA. As long as this school continues, fathers will network sons, uncles will network nephews, and so on. If you want to see results for young women, encourage them to petition to allow themselves to be integrated into that school. Send a clear message to the fathers that they need to care for their daughters as they care for their sons within the established institution. Then it would not be necessary to create people from scratch, but instead take advantage of what is already there and stop treating CBA as hallowed ground for males only. The fact that that school is treated with any reverence at all speaks volumes about which, in my opinion, of the 2 sexes is perceived as more important.
You're going too fast. Yeah, I'm watching it. You gotta slow down. Slow down. You're going up to 78. You're going up to 33 and 30.
I only have one more paragraph.
Slow down.
She's got to get it.
Oh. In closing, I have to say, the only development I'm looking forward to and the only decision I'm glad my elected officials have made in many months is for the Sloan Kettering Cancer Treatment Center. Something that was not in time to save my father's life, but will be used to provide no other cancer victims. They will move into an existing building that has been empty for a very long time, with very easy access to many roads. The disruption to their neighbors will be minimal, and they will not change very much of the current landscape. This all had earmarks of a well-thought-out plan and is the culmination of the decisions all around. There is a need for this treatment center and for the quality of care this already established institution will be bringing to our town. We are blessed to be able to say that Sloan Kettering has chosen Middletown to call home for their satellite office. I do not feel I can say the same for this school.
Have you been up before?
Yes, I have. Barbara Amadeo, AMO DEO. 7 Open Road. My name is Barbara Amadeo, and I've been living on Chapel Hill Road for the past 15 years. There are many reasons why I am against the school being built down the block from my home. I have some of the same concerns as Mrs. Kimberly Beaver. My property backs up to hers, and the flooding that occurs there is as bad as you can see by the pictures she submitted. However, according to FEMA maps, our homes are not located in a flood zone. I'm afraid of how much worse the flooding will get if the plans for this campus go through. I do not feel confident that what they've proposed will work to contain the water. I'm not an expert, and it appears neither was the person they hired, considering their environmental report was done by their engineer, who had no recollection that he was the person who authored the report based on something he only read in the first place. My main concerns are traffic and safety. These roads, like many in the area, were not built for high traffic, yet that's what's happened over the years. There is no way a one-lane road in each direction can handle it. Anyone who has driven this road during their commute can attest to how backed up the traffic gets at the Route 35 intersection from the overflow at that turning lane. Each morning, I wait anywhere from 2 to 3 traffic light changes, and that's just to make a right-hand turn. Making the road wider in front of the school isn't enough. This school doesn't just impact traffic on Chapel Hill Road and Kings Highway East. Once a bottleneck occurs on Chapel Hill Road, there will be cars cutting through Comanche Drive in order to get by. There will be a major impact on the Crestview and Shore Crest development, with even more cars cutting through to avoid the lights at Route 35. None of this... None of this was even looked at by their traffic expert. Currently, there are plans for an emergency access road. How long will it take for this road to become an alternate access road? I'm sure if this campus is built, There will be many neighborhood complaints on traffic at upcoming township committee meetings, and this sounds like a solution they could use to try to appease the Chapel Hill neighborhood group. The Middletown Board of Ed has already deemed my corner too dangerous for a bus stop, and the buses now come into my development, which has no sidewalks. According to the Board of Ed, 48 buses travel Chapel Hill Road and Kings Highway East during the hours of 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. There are 48 active bus routes. How can there possibly be minimal impact if their student drop-off is 7:30 to 8:15 a.m.? The line of sight is already poor at the intersection of Mohican and Chapel Hill Road. What is it going to be like with some of those buses lined up in the traffic as well? Their study mentions after-school activities, but it makes it seem as if almost everyone will be leaving the school. If they want to build such a great campus, surely they plan to hold their own events there. Anyone who has been to something as simple as a basketball or track meet at North knows what a nightmare that is, and this residential area cannot handle it. An argument that seems to be made is how most schools are located in residential neighborhoods. While I agree that's true, as almost everyone sitting here knows, those schools were there well before most of the homes were. People that live close to those schools made a choice to do so. I've also heard how none of us would be happy with any kind of development on that land. Yes, of course, in a perfect world, the property would stay as is, but in reality, I would much rather see homes on that land that blend in with the rest of the neighborhood and contribute taxes. Their very own feasibility study proves that there is not, nor will there be, a need for this school in Monmouth County, let alone Middletown Township. There are so many other places that are already vacant that could be used. Why not start smaller and grow from there? Why should Middletown gamble on this unlicensed school becoming a success? Either way, our neighborhood loses. If the school is successful, then our neighborhood will be ruined by all it will bring. If the school fails, we will be left with even more vacant buildings. I've done my research, and I want to point out something that Trinity Hall states on its own website. We look forward to being good neighbors to those surrounding our permanent campus. We respect the commitment of those who live in the Chapel Hill area to their neighborhood, and should they wish to speak to us directly, we welcome a conversation about our plans for the campus and our involvement with the larger community. So I'm asking you to please be honest. Let everyone know of your future plans for Phase 2, because right now, nothing has been said. Stop making it sound like most of Chapel Hill wants this school to be built. That isn't the case, and it's misleading. If you really want to respect us, then please respect our wishes and look elsewhere for your campus, perhaps somewhere with a real need. Anyone who has driven down Chapel Hill Road and Kings Highway East has surely seen the numerous Stop Trinity Hall signs, although unfortunately many of them have been stolen. The lone Trinity supporter signs were all along on the proposed sites. I think that speaks volumes. Word on the street since January has been it's a done deal, and yet I've been to almost every planning board meeting. I never gave up. I sit with neighbors, some I've known for years, and others I've only met because of these hearings. We are a community that is united. Looking across the room on the Trinity side throughout these meetings, I've seen mostly board members, trustees, and staff who are here mainly for their jobs, and a small amount of parents. I'm appealing to the planning board, please don't give up either. You live here in Middletown. Most of their students don't. Please do what's best for our neighborhood. I'd like to think that all of you know in your hearts that Trinity Hall does not belong here in Chapel Hill, and I hope you vote accordingly. Let us show everyone that Middletown can't be bought. Thanks for your time.
Your name and address, please.
Kathleen Zapsik, 12 Beechwood Road.
Please spell your last name.
Zapsik, Z-A-Z-C-I-C.
Please raise your right hand. For testimony about the good board, to the truth and nothing but the truth. Thank you.
Before you start, everyone lined up along that wall, a speaker, and all the way around the corner. First of all, I thank everyone for being very affordable in coming up and establishing your own line. We've heard an awful lot about traffic, about taxes, about fit, doesn't not fit, et cetera, We're looking to hear new things. So,
I'm sorry, you can't hear me? My microphone's good.
We're just looking for new information here, so please, if you want to come up and you've been standing there, and I understand you'd like to speak, just come up and say, I agree with the people, traffic's going to be terrible. Thank you. You know, we're at 10:30 here already, and we still have to go through lawyer summations, so. Go ahead.
I've been a resident of Middletown for 40 years, 21 of those in my home on Beechwood Road. My home directly buffers, backs up to the proposed development, and I support Trinity Hall. Thank you very much.
Your name and address, sir?
Andrew Zapsik, C-A-B-C-I-C, 202 Beechwood Road, Middletown.
Please raise your right hand. Your testimony about the
I've been a resident of Middletown for 54 years. I had the privilege with my 5 brothers to go to St. Leo's and CBA. My 3 boys went to St. Leo's and CBA. My daughter went to St. Leo's and CBA. And it's right back Catholic, rather. It's been a long night. You know, sitting behind me are friends, some college friends, some high school friends, neighborhood friends. I live directly behind one of the administrative buildings that's proposed by the developer, and my wife and I have, when we moved in 1992, we looked out on the cornfield, Chapel Hill Farm. It was great and we loved it, but we said to ourselves, wouldn't it be great if this were here forever? And it would be. But the reality is we don't own that farm, and we did not own that farm, and we pay taxes on that farm. That's not our farm. So we're looking at what's best for us, for our neighbors, for everyone in that area. Yeah, there's going to be more traffic, whether it's 19 houses, one of which was going to be literally 50, 60 feet behind my house, having a party. When we're having a party, perhaps even at 2 a.m. with young kids, who knows what's going to be happening back there. What would I rather have, and what would my family rather have? I'd rather have Trinity, a school that's going to be raising young women and educating young women, just like my family, my boys had the opportunity to go to these types of schools. I don't begrudge them the right to put that school there. It's a permitted use. If it's a permitted use, then your job is to say, well, if it's a permitted use, what are the restrictions and what are going to require this applicant to do? And that's what we should be concentrating on. It's a permitted use. They're allowed to do this. Make sure that they address the traffic needs. Make sure they address those water problems that I have in my house, that people down at the end of my street, at the end of Beechwood and on Stavola have. Make sure you address them. Make sure your professionals address them. If you can promise me and my family and everyone else in Middletown that you're going to address those issues and make sure that this school toes the line, just like every other school has to if they're depositing the you have to take care of it. If there's traffic, they have to take care of it. So, I did sit through an awful lot of people who had agendas. My only agenda is I want the best for my family and the best for Middletown. I don't want 19 houses behind my present house. I don't want 300 houses. That's possible. I don't even know if it is. I don't want that. I want something akin to a Trinity School, which is, like that lady said, who lives over on Greenwood Terrace, with CBA, a good neighbor. And if they can guarantee they're going to be good neighbors, and you keep an eye on them, make sure they're good neighbors, then I have no problem with that. There was some type of rumor that my family got extra setback for being in favor of this. That's absolutely untrue. We have the exact same setback as everyone else, and it's really unfair. And I don't know who said that, and they should be ashamed of themselves. We didn't get any special consideration for voicing our opinion, and it's sad that people think that if someone has an opinion other than their own opinion, that somehow they were paid off or were given something other than everyone else. We were not. The exact same setbacks as everybody up and down Beechwood. It's very unfair. But I do thank you for sitting, volunteers that you are. This is, in insane. It's absolutely insane. We're at 10:30, and we're still going on with people who want to go on and on, just like I'm doing right now, so I'm going to stop. Thank you.
Did you do that previously?
No, I have not.
Your name and address.
Mary Rawlinson, RAWLINSON, 630 Kings Highway East.
Please raise your right hand. Swear testimony about you before the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Thank you.
Well, good evening. I won't be long at all. I just wanted to sort of take a different point of view, maybe give a little bit of a historical overview. I live on Kings Highway East, so when I first moved there, I was curious as to why it was called Kings Highway. And this is New Jersey history, Wikipedia, everything. Kings Highway, in many areas in the Northeast, evolved from a network of Indian paths, especially in Monmouth County, into postal trails, and then into an important colonial American wagon and stagecoach route for settlers along the Atlantic coast. In 1664, British King Charles II requested a road from Boston to New Jersey, newly conquered from the Dutch. So that's just a little context for you. There's a terrific book that was written 99 years ago. It's called Old Roads from New York, and in each chapter there's old roads from Staten Island, old roads from Long Island, there's an old road from Middletown, and it was written in 1915 in the library. Entering Sandy Hook Bay, you pass the long hook itself with its famous lighthouse near the tip. And now your journey bears toward the land to New Jersey. You are to find an old road, clearly defined on maps a century old, running from the Navesink Highlands back inland. This is written in 1915. One such map shows the road running in a westerly direction toward Middletown and dotted by a few farms marked S. Taylor, E. Taylor, and D. Conover. These names and some of the homes of that period are to be found today along the old road, this in 1915. In fact, there lies on this highway a hamlet of 13 houses which is almost intact. The whole hamlet, practically as it was in Revolutionary days.
I gotta interrupt you.
Yeah.
You gotta get to a point here.
Well, I'm only, it's just one
No,
little...
no, we know.
Okay.
You gotta get to something relevant to us.
All right.
But then you kind of all looked at it.
Well, you're welcome.
Yeah,
The relevancy is that was 1915, and this is 2014, and 11 of those 13 little houses are still there, and although on Kings Highway East, it's not considered in the historic district because it's adjacent to the historic district, I think that there surely is a case to be made between what is required to be done, as the gentleman before me just said, in terms of regulatory permitting, water tables, water basins, and what should be done in considering the nature of the land, the fragility of the nearby properties, and what was good for the neighborhood and in the region, and installing a traffic light on the corner, widening of the roads, accommodating school buses. I actually don't have terrible problems with these. I went to girls' Catholic school for 12 years, private school in Jersey City. I have 4 sisters who did the same, my mother and her aunts. We have 96 years of terrific moral compass, and I am a strong proponent for single-sex girls, private Catholic or non-Catholic education. So I don't have any gripe with that. I just think that that particular corner in that particular neighborhood isn't the optimum place for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Derek Constable.
Up a little bit. You can up before, yours on the road.
Guilty. Derek Donahue, 631 Kings Highway East. I had a few points. I will be as brief as practical. But yes, it has been a long 6-month journey. And I, as not the applicant, but as the resident, do find it a burden to be here at 10:30 at night, be here at 1 o'clock in the morning, etc. So I appreciate your patience in giving the public their chance to speak after several months. In particular, as I live along Kings Highway East, many people have mentioned the traffic study and the impact that will have. Similar to what the folks have said, in the Middletown Master Plan, and I will actually quote from that, "The Chapel Hill Historic District is of great historic significance to the Township of Middletown. It reflects the architectural styles of the 18th and 19th centuries, is a setting for significant events during the Revolutionary War, provided an excellent harbor at a time when all commerce was done at sea, and the site of strong influence of youth." Yes, it's a very nice place, but more importantly, as you go through that district, during the May meeting, many talks were had of what we may have to do to accommodate the roughly 50% of traffic that the applicant's expert estimated will be coming from the north, with the predominant travel pattern in the morning being a westerly along Kings Highway East, moving left onto Chapel Hill Road, with the reverse in the afternoon. My home was actually built starting in the 1740s, expanded in 1810. That's not relevant. What's relevant is I am 18 feet from the edge of the road. So why did anything to widen that road to accommodate the traffic of the applicant, I would find a keen interest. Because I bought a house knowing it was close to the road, not knowing that the road literally would become a drive-through window in my living room if this were to come to fruition. The additional road improvements for Kings Highway East and the impact, not because the applicant is in a historic district, but the impact on the historic district just adjacent to it, has not been evaluated by any of the experts, nor have any provisions been made. Not understanding the real impacts of that more than 50% of the Trinity Hall traffic on the historic district is not protecting our environment for our own Middletown master plan. So, in my view, it is just not a suitable site due to the impact to the north on the historic areas. However, staying on traffic, there's many other traffic impacts that were ignored by the applicant. Namely, the other 50% of the traffic generated that will be coming from the south on Chapel Hill Road. I had asked in an earlier meeting if any of the experts, from any of the lawyers, had studied that extensively, and the answer was no. I was actually shocked at that, seeing that I'm a resident who has a very difficult time getting through that intersection. Fortunately for me, on the handful of times I have to bring my children to school. So as such, yesterday, Tuesday, I sat at that intersection outside of the PNC Bank for a couple of hours, starting at 4 o'clock, and I would like to share with the board my observations. Between 4 and 6 p.m., there were roughly 64 turns of the light, meaning, we went from green to yellow to red, green to yellow to red. And on average, it was the green light for about 22 seconds, yellow for about 3 seconds, and red for a little over a minute and a half. During that time, roughly 9 cars, on average, anywhere ranging from a low of 6 or high of 13, were able to make a left-hand turn. This is relevant because the left turn dedicated turn lane holds approximately 4 to 5 cars. 5 if they're really tightly together, 4 if people are lazily spaced, obviously fewer if you have trucks or buses. There are only 1, 2, 3. The vast majority.
Just for our identification, this is south on Chapel Hill, making a left onto 35 south.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You're in that next to Whole Foods?
Yes.
Okay.
So admittedly, I'm not a traffic expert. I'm a guy there with the iPad stop, right? That's just. So what my observations were is that the majority of the time, that left turn lane was either at or above capacity, meaning the cars wanting to make a left exceeded or went beyond that. Sometimes to cross the double yellow and queue up over it. Other times with their left-hand blinker on and correctly in the one lane going up to it. There were people making a left from the jug handle. There were people that left the Whole Foods parking lot, made a right-hand turn on Chapel Hill and queued into the left. So it's not only the traffic coming down south on Chapel Hill Road from Kings Highway East, but also all of the traffic that's generated at that intersection from both the jug handle U-turn as well as coming out of, the Whole Foods shopping plaza and the other businesses there. In my 2 hours sitting there, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, only 7 turns of 64 turns of the light that little 4 to 5 car turn lane was under capacity, meaning it did not have the full complement of cars in it. And that's without adding it And that's at 4 to 6 p.m. That's not at the prime morning time or at the time of 3 o'clock departure. So I just stated that, as far as I know, I'm the only one that's come to this board with any actual observations, and I'm shocked that none of the applicants would have bothered to do so. Moving along, many folks have cited the feasibility study that was done by the applicant. And as has been stated before, there is a declining population that we have mentioned. Although most notably, the segment that's expected to decline fastest would be white, non-Hispanic females ages 15 to 19. This segment is expected to decline faster than the overall population, declining 14% for 10 years from 8 to 18 and continue the decline after 18. That was the segment that the applicant's own study had indicated would be the most likely target for the highest portion of their overall enrollment. In addition, in figure 17 of the applicant's study that they commissioned, and I will quote, "While there is a group for whom single-sex school for girls is an important reason, that is not the primary reason for the majority of people. The number one reason was academics, number two, athletics, and number three, Catholic faith." Figure 22, the applicant's own feasibility study, question 17. In choosing a high school for your girl or girls, how important are the following factors in your decision? And there was a list. In the interest of time, academic excellence was first. There were 15 more factors listed in rank order of importance by the 2,000 plus survey respondents, and single-sex education was last. In figure 18, question 13 of the same report, the question was, if you're uncertain about enrolling or would not enroll your girl or girls, what are the top 3 reasons? So number 1 was cannot afford tuition. Number 2 is academic program may not be competitive. And number 3 was athletic or co-curricular programs may not be competitive. I point that out because the cannot afford tuition. The estimate in the feasibility study was a $13,000 500 tuition based on CBA. I just wanted to point out in the most recent school year for 13 to 14, Trinity's Hall tuition was $16,750, and CBA for next year was $14,550. So it's already a 15% increase, and I'm sure that CBA did not hold their tuition flat year on year, as most schools, unfortunately, as a parent, do not. Also, again, in the interest of time, other folks have mentioned that the applicant was behind their own feasibility studies growth plan or runway of 79 girls for the first year and 150 in the second. By their own reports, they're a little over halfway there after the end of year 2. That's what is important to me, is I would ask the board to consider the track record of performance of the applicant to date as another indication of credibility and the ability to launch an all-girls school in a declining population geography during an extended period of economic stagnation and with a yet-to-be-proven brand. If we were to look at the study a little further, it had mentioned that the initial study was centered around the Wingcroft area. So I asked myself, is the lower projected enrollment so far, is it a function of perceived academic quality? Don't know. Is it a function of higher than projected tuition? Don't know. Or is it maybe a change in location? Because if you look at the location that was drawn, and again in Appendix E of that same report, there's actually a circle drawn around the center of where the study was done for this particular school. And the study indicated that within the region, the total Monmouth County population was roughly 630,000, precisely 630,380. I know that the circle encompasses more than just Monmouth County. It's into a little bit of, Middlesex on the top and a little bit of Ocean at the bottom. So it's basically all of Monmouth County. However, when you look at that a little more closely, you'll see that there's something called the Panhandle region, Allentown, Millstone, Roosevelt, Freehold, Western Monmouth, which would include Englishtown, Farmingdale, Freehold, Howell, Manalapan, and Marlborough. And then pieces of coastal, Avon, Delmar, Manasquan, Seagirt, Spring Lake, etc. That type of area. That's, when I add up all of those western and southern towns, it's 312,835 of the 63038. The reason that is important is because if you were to take the exact same circle or radius that was deemed to be an appropriate travel time around the center of the original proposed school in Winthrop and adjust that to their Trinity Hall location, your center is now in Chapel Hill Road, a little bit south of Kings Highway East. However, the right-hand side of your circle is pretty much now over the bay. And your left-hand side of the circle cuts right through the middle of Colts Neck rather than coming through the west end of Freehold, essentially cutting off a lot of your target population. So, using the same logic as the applicant and as their own feasibility study, it's not surprising to me that you would expect a smaller enrollment with a location that's that much further away and less central to the Monmouth County overall community. I wanted to see if I was just having my own thoughts or if this were to play out looking at other schools. So what I did was I took a look at another school, private in nature, the Randy School. They're not exactly located in Lincroft. They're located in the northeastern corner of Tinton Falls, right adjacent to Shrewsbury. And if you look at Randy, according to their own student directory, there's 781 students listed in their directory for 13-14. And 57% of them reside outside of the applicant's feasibility study radius when applied to a Chapel Hill Road location. So if I were to take Randy, move it up to Chapel Hill Road, you lose over half of their students from parts of Colts Neck. I don't know which parts, because Colts Neck's on the border, so assume half of Colts Neck can stay, half goes. Freehold, Marlborough, Manalapan, Allenhurst, Avon, Bayhead, Delmar, Brick, Riel, Elberon, Farmingdale, Fort River, Howell, Jackson, Lavalette, Manasquan, Millstone, Monroe, Morganville.
Can I slow you down a minute here?
Yes.
Somewhere in here is a specific point.
My point is the school. The applicant has a feasibility study. The center of that study moved. By moving the location of the school, you no longer can draw upon as many students because the commute's too long.
And that's your point?
That's my point.
Correct. Okay. That's good.
So my initial concern with traffic is, what if they get the 400 to 500 students? It's a disaster. If you look at their own study and you look at this location, the ability to attract that many or get that many students, I think the board needs to consider their own study, taking their own circle and moving it, and to say, can they actually do this, or will we end up with another Croydon Hall that someone has to go bail out 15 years down the road?
Nobody bailed out. They sold the property.
Many years.
They went out of business.
Yes, they went out of business, correct. Correct.
But the town didn't bail them out.
I did not say the town bailed them out, sir. Did I?
Well, the town owns the property now. The town, excuse me, the town paid for that property when Croydon Hall was vacant, gone long ago. So nobody bailed them out. Nobody bought the property after they left.
Thank you for bringing up Croydon Hall, because you know what? I would like to go on record and say that that is one of my concerns. We already had one planning board member excuse himself due to a potential conflict of interest, as the town has a revenue-generating use agreement with the applicant for, in my eyes, my opinion, the white elephant Croydon Hall buildings that were wildly underutilized, ironically, before Trinity Hall came in and did some upgrades and has actually put them to, I will say, more full use. Before each of the last 4 planning board meetings, the Stop Trinity Hall development sign was removed from my property. Conveniently, 2 or 3 days before each of these last meetings in March, April, May, and now June. It's, part of me just laughs, because to me it's a sign of petty behavior undertaken by adults with some either affection for or affiliation with the applicant.
But you don't know that.
No, I don't.
It could have been taken by kids. It could have been taken by anyone. So,
It could have been taken by the chief of police from Middletown, I don't know.
right, and it might have been a precise crime on the I mean, that's not really relevant to these proceedings.
No, it's not.
Then don't do it. And the wait, the hours late.
Yes, it is. The hour's late. And that's not my choice. I didn't put in an application, and I came to many, many, many meetings here to hear many, many experts speak. And in my view tonight, I thought I wasted my time, to be honest with you, when I arrived, when I heard the applicant get up and say, despite what we swore we told you, oops, we were wrong, and we can't even find a driveway. I honestly thought you were going to send us all home, because if they can't find a driveway, to me, oh my God, what else is missing? And the fact that you didn't do that tonight tells me, has the decision been made already regardless? And that is one of my concerns to the board, to be honest with you. I'm not saying, look, we've all been here for many months. It would be hard to envision a situation where any one speaker tonight, pro or against, would sway a board member decision that passionately from one speech after 6+ months of discussion. I'm not that naive. But I will tell you, in the April planning board meeting, I was really frustrated to actually watch my planning board's attorney, and I know everyone here knows each other way better than I do. You guys all see each other, this attorney, and that expert, these planning boards. It's part of the roles you guys choose to do, and I know that you come into contact with each other through many situations. But just watching the lawyer of the planning board embrace and hug the applicant's attorney and one of the sponsors at the break, when I thought we were actually leaving and not going until 1 o'clock in the morning, just conveys a sense of, to be honest with you,
I was wondering where that came from.
communality.
I was wondering where that came from, because I heard that back from a number of people. There's a guy over there who on the way at the break, when I was trying to go to the men's room, said, gee, the board's doing a good job. I said, tell him. He said, gee, you're doing a good job. I said, thanks. I gotta go to the men's room. And you said I was hugging people? You're the guy? Thank you. Thank you. Because I want to know where the source of that rumor came from.
Absolutely. I would like to enter this in. Here's a copy of my letter to the town council that I actually sent.
You're entering on the serious, and you're actually ruining a very good meeting, sir.
The only person I've ever hugged.
Not from a person who's been here 16 years. I'm really distressed at how you're presenting yourself and your case.
Sir?
Well, I just want to know that you're the source of that rumor. I don't appreciate that.
Well, many.
The guy's over there, my hugger friend, someplace over there. Who basically, I was saying in a polite way, I gotta go to the men's room.
Actually, I'd like to also address, you're the second person in a row to say a decision's already been made. Where is this being inferred from? How could that be inferred?
There's no old boy network in this area. I'm really upset the way it's
As part of my job, exactly, as part of my job, I actually, I was reevaluating where to send my own daughter to school. And as I was talking with folks at different private schools and asking them where their students went after 8th grade, one of the local private schools said, oh, well, because we could always send people to Trinity Hall, and they have a new campus that's being built, it's already been approved, it's going to be right by your house. So I'm telling you that I've heard this from many people in the academic world. You asked me where I heard it. That's where I heard it.
That's enough. I'm tired of what you heard of, insinuated, just quiet. I don't need your help. I'm about fed up with the entire crowd and about to end it all here. You are out of line. And no, I'm not interested in your apology. I'm interested in you sitting down. And next. Yes, sir. Yeah. Have you fed up Yeah, I got it. I need Jim to swear you in. Oh, I'm sorry, right here.
John, E-B-A-V-E-N-E, 1 Trade Winds Lane, Seabright, New Jersey.
Sorry, what name?
Trade Winds Lane,
Trade.
Seabright, New Jersey. I'm a contract purchaser of 273 Chapel Hill Road. I'm a real estate developer. I built houses all over the state, many of them next to schools. This house is very important to me because I'm building for my son and daughter-in-law, and they're going to start a family there. And we're very much aware of the Chapel Hill School. We think it would be great for the neighborhood, they'll be good neighbors, and I hope you guys approve it. I think it'd be a good use of the property. Thank you.
My name is Paul Hines, I'm at 5'4", for Paul Hines, NES 144. Excuse me, I'm getting a little more tired, so sorry if my voice gets out, I'll try to keep it I'm going to try to keep it, I'm very respectful of the time that you all are putting in. I will try to cut through some of the points that may be repetitive, but I have some I really need to point out, ask you to bear with me while I make my points. I realize the hour is late, but if it's too late for everybody, can we just call it quits for tonight and go home and come back again? It's too important to rush me and everyone else through the testimony. I put a lot of thought into this. I didn't get to put as much time into it as I wanted to because I work full time with two small kids. And I'm really here actually to represent my family and my 2 kids, because that's my big concern about the impact of the school in the neighborhood. I've lived for 11 years on Woodgate Road. We actually went overseas for 2 years in the middle of that, and we chose to come back specifically to Chapel Hill because we love the neighborhood. We picked a very good neighborhood. I helped with some friends who lived in the area a long time. We love Chapel Hill, we love Middletown. Once we decided to have kids, this is where we want to raise our kids. So we actually made a decision to even come back to the same road that we used to live on after 2 years staying overseas. We grew up in a small town in Ireland, population of 6,000 people, much smaller than Middletown. People come from Ireland to visit us, and they expect the Sopranos. They're coming to New Jersey, they expect leather jackets, guns, crazies, pizzerias, there's lots of pizzerias, thank God. They come to our house, and they sit in our backyard, and they say, my God, this is quieter than our house at home. This is amazing. We love this place. You guys picked such a great place. And we did, and we're proud of it. We're proud to live in Chapel Hill, proud to live in Middletown. I love it. I want to keep it how it is to the best I can for my kids. Based on I made a good decision. I don't want to have made the wrong decision. Having moved my kids overseas for 2 years, and one of them has about sensory issues, another move was not an option for us. If it was me and my husband and he gave permission to the school, we probably would go. I think it will destroy the neighborhood. But we don't really have that choice because our kid needs stability. 5 and 2 years old, they're small, they need this. So we envision our kids making some of their first steps and milestones on the road that they live on. It's a quiet road, it's residential, but it runs the risk of cut-throughs from Trinity Hall if it gets to be on Chapel Hill, I believe. We already see some evidence of cut-throughs the last 11 years on the road. And when people cut through, they don't come through at the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, they come through at 40, 50 plus miles an hour. The speed that they were traveling at on the main road, on Kings Highway East, and they'll come in off the Sleepy Hollow. Sometimes there's tree work going on, there's a detour. They come through, they come through, shum, shum, shum. We're used to shum every 10 minutes. I don't want that to change. So I'll jump to some of my points, and but I want the plea that I want to make to you. At the last planning board, my first one that I got to come to, because I really learned on Trinity Hall in earnest in April. I didn't really know what it was. And I live in Woodgate, I live in the back of this. How did I miss this? I don't know. But there was a play on the words, intensity and dense use of the site. And that was one of the things I was questioning last time. And it really got me thinking about definitions of words. And I was annoyed with myself because I couldn't capture the essence of what I wanted to say to that guy, because it was late at night, we were all tired. But I thought a lot about words and how impactful my words might be to you, all of you. Obligation, responsibility, and accountability are key to what you do.
It's key to what the school will do for its kids, and it's key to what I will do for my children, and the way I want to raise my children, and the environment I want to live in. So, you know, when I hear, I'm not going to go back and cycle over some of the stuff, but I do want to say, to the point about, you know, the gentleman that you got frustrated with, I understand his distress, because I feel the same distress over the misinformation about the school. And there's misinformation on both sides. There's misunderstandings on both sides. And I actually met with the mayor of Middletown, and I pled with her to put out a fact sheet, balanced on both sides, to inform everybody of the truth behind what the school, what the site could or could not mean. Because one of my neighbors told me, well, the school owns the site, and they're going to build 300 condos if we don't let them build the school. Oh my God, can you imagine what that would be like? I'm like, that's nuts, isn't it? Doesn't so many things. I don't even know that much. I've spent a lot of time with Mr. Ringstein, he's been very kind, and I understand more now about how the planning works, how the master plan works, how zoning works, and I'm learning. I actually, now I'm in this community with both feet. I might have dipped in with the code before. I have 2 kids, I'm going to raise them here. I'm in with both feet, I want to understand everything. I'll be meeting with lots of people from the Township Committee over the next couple of years, especially if the school goes through. Because someone will have to be responsible and accountable for the destruction that will come to my neighborhood and the danger that I believe will come to my neighborhood if the school goes ahead. By the school's own traffic study, they have 200 teenagers driving on the roads. That's their own revised traffic study, second traffic study. But I think 200, I forget the exact breakdown, but it's 200 people driving on the road. Inexperienced drivers. Chapel Hill's not a safe road. I'm not going to go over all that for all the testimony. It's not a safe road. Experienced driving comes with time. Even if you do the benefit driving course, you don't acquire it in a year. And I'm just going to quickly kind of state something. And then, you know, the first speaker of the night made such a powerful comment. And we don't want that to happen again. You have an obligation not to let that happen again. I think the school has a responsibility to the students that put in this school not to put them in that danger. My husband and I were in a, have you all seen planes, trains, and automobiles? That crazy scene on the road where they're going through and the fingers are stuck in the dashboard because they go through 2 articulated trucks. My husband and I had an experience like that. My husband is probably the best driver I know, and I don't say because he's my husband. He's an outstanding driver with years of experience. And we had such a bad spin from a miss of a second on the highway. And we said goodbye to each other. We're done. By some miracle, and by his skill, we ended up on the verge, me with my fingers in the dashboard, thinking we were going to die, having said goodbye to each other. And we didn't. By some luck and skill combination, I'm here. I'm here with my kids, I'm here with my husband, and that's what happened. I don't want this second, this minute is all it takes. And you have 200 inexperienced drivers going up and down that road that has an accident rate of 13, one accident every 13 days over the 2011 to 2014. One accident every 13 days. What will 200 17, 18-year-old drivers do on that road? It will be chaos. Now let me dial it back to my specific concerns. You will have kids driving who, you know, we don't want to say model kids, everything, they're great kids, I'm sure, but kids are kids and they're adventurers. They're going to be out driving, they're going to be exploring their neighborhood. Hey, can we find a cut through? Can we find a shortcut? Hey, let me race you up here. I hear the drag racing that was referred to earlier on, right? I hear that from my backyard, and I'm worried that it's going to start creeping and play around the place with that when my kids start driving, they're going to be exposed to that. But good kids, just exploring the neighborhood, but you know, they don't, 17-year-old is not as responsible as a 27-year-old, 37-year-old, 47-year-old. They cut through, they say, let's you go up Chapel Hill, I'm going to go up this way and see who gets to the school first. Let's see if we can find a shortcut. My road would be one of those potential shortcuts. I live on the intersection of Woodgate Road and Cibola. My 2 kids, my 5-year-old and my 2-year-old, in the next few years will be riding bikes, scooting, playing ball, and with their friends at that intersection. It takes that for someone to ruin my life. That can happen anywhere. I can take them to New York City and it can happen like that. But I have a responsibility to my kids to get you to listen to me, and you have an obligation, I believe, to keep us safe in the township and to not destroy what we know to be a safe, beautiful environment that we're happy to raise our kids in. I
have statistics here from the DMV and from the CDC, but if I understand the earlier testimony, because they're sitting on the printer at work, the actual reports, I only have to give you the stats, but you can guess the stats. It's about teenage driving. So if you want me to state you the stats, I can, and I have their website links here, but the actual reports themselves are sitting on my printer at work. Do you want to hear the stats, or do you care?
I think we can all stipulate that teenage drivers are probably not as good as the general public.
There we go.
I've raised four of them myself. I mean, a lot of red cars.
Right, so there's endless reports, and we all know that. So I just want acknowledgement of that. You're putting 200 inexperienced drivers on the road, a road that is not 520. It's not the road that meets up with CBA. It's not. It's Chapel Hill Road meeting with Kings Highway. That turn is horrific. There's blind spots everywhere. All the residents coming out. If you come off of Sleepy Hollow, the lower part of Sleepy Hollow, onto Chapel Hill, and tries to go onto the northern part of Sleepy Hollow, it's a horrific turn. Inexperienced drivers will have more fender benders. We will, I don't want the rate of accidents, but it will be big. None of us want to imagine the awful situation that was referred to in the first speaker. So, you know, I'm here trying to make the odds better for my life and for my kids. So the other thing I want to talk about too is that the planning board, and planning boards before you, have seen fit to approve a 21-house development on Kings Highway East, where the two houses, or I don't know what you call that site, where the two cows, or I don't know where those poor cows are going to live, but 21 houses being developed there. There's a 10-house development off Chapel Hill Road on Purple Road. There is permission for 19 houses and one duplex, or 20 houses now that the affordable housing was changed on the site that Trinity Hall wants to purchase for its school. And the site beside that, the Conway Farm, has permission for 5 additional houses. Forget the school. You've already, and your predecessors have already put wheels in motion to change Chapel Hill a bit more than we would all love. But we know we don't live in an ideal world. So we have to take the best of what's coming, you know? And so I actually heard so much misinformation when I first heard about the school. I wanted to talk to everybody. And I actually talked to the school. I talked to the head of the school. And I had a very good conversation. And I was interested in exploring, could we somehow understand, could we get some commitment from the school, very much around the accountability, responsibility. Who will take responsibility? I don't want to do this after the fact. I want to know, if the school is coming in here, I want to know now, what will you do to safeguard the neighborhood? What will you do to not be an intrusion on our lifestyle? And we had a great conversation, and I thought some positive things would come from it, and I feel I got lip service. I was disappointed with the response I got. I didn't get, I felt, a commitment to move forward with something tangible. I got the same kind of stuff that's on the website, and we will be a good neighbor. To that end, I do want to say that I'm disappointed even more so with some of the behavior. So the gentleman who spoke before me from Beechwood, who's next to the neighbor, I guess, but we don't know each other, maybe we should get to know each other. We have been hearing about, you know, he had some comment about things that were said about him and some setback. I hadn't heard that one, I don't know that one. But I have heard, and my neighbor has told me, things that the school has said. And, you know, board members have had an aggressive stance with residents of Chapel Hill. And that doesn't gel with the, will be a good neighbor. And so people have talked about the deceptive nature of the school and the application. I resonate with that now. And I don't want that in my backyard. I am one of the not in my backyard. I don't want 500 school kids on a field in my backyard. I don't want 200 inexperienced drivers in my backyard. I don't want everything that's going to go with it. I'll gladly take the 20 houses. I'll take the 5 next door, the 10 on Brook Road, and the 21 where the 2 houses are going to go to somewhere else. I'll take it. But I'm here to plead with your responsibility, your obligation to not put us in harm's way. And what will you do? Who will be responsible and accountable when the inevitable begins to happen? Because you won't be able to undo. You definitely won't be able to undo buildings that have been put in place, or you could, but it would be ridiculously expensive. You won't be able to undo personal harm. You won't be able to undo people who have been injured in accidents or worse. You bear that responsibility, and your tenure here is short-lived, but the effect of what you do is long-term. I'm here for the long haul. I know you're all residents, and I know you're here for the long haul. The hearings have been long. You know, I hope that you take everything into consideration and that you make the right decision for the town. I think two things I want to say, two final things I want to say. I don't think the board has all the right information to hand to make a decision. I don't know how you can possibly make a decision when things like the access road on Stavola isn't even sorted out. I talked to the fire chief in Middletown. That was one of the people I talked to. He wasn't really fully aware of the access road. He's like, oh, I've heard of those things. I don't know much about that one. And I was like, well, what would the substrate, what would the surface be? Because I've heard that it would be pavers. And he was like, well, definitely couldn't be pavers because you need to carry fire trucks. How can you even make a decision when this kind of detail is not worked out? The road that is not there in the wrong place, you don't have the information, in my view, to make the right decision. And I would just urge you, because of the effect of your decision, please don't feel because you've been doing this for 6 months that you need to take the decision now or next month. This decision we're going to live with for years. We will live with this for years and years. And the very last thing I want to say, because I just worry that subconsciously or subconsciously, I don't know, and I'm sorry, Mr. Ostrander, to kind of pick on you, but it was actually a comment that you made the last time about you made it at about 8:30. If you want to go back to the transcript the last time, I don't have the transcript, but I took note of the time. It was about 8:30 p.m. at the last planning board meeting. The conversation or the testimony was around the statement from the Diocese of Trenton about the viability of the school and whether should they want another capital school for the school. But you made a comment about, I understand why they're making that statement. They don't want to lose students from their school to this school, and it's business. I get it. It's business. We understand that. The school is a commercial enterprise. It's a business. It might be not for profit, but it will turn a profit and it will use that profit to serve its own interests. And that's within its rights. It can do that. But it doesn't serve the interests of me and my neighborhood and Middletown. We have enough not-for-profit schools in Middletown serving Monmouth County. Let this school go to a different site that is safe for its students and that it can fulfill its needs and goals for its students. I'm fulfilled with the school and its goal for I have 2 boys. They're never going to go to that school. I don't care. I have a really good friend whose daughter is enrolled in the school, and he has great reasons for putting his daughter in the school. Good for him. Good for him that he has that option. This is not the right spot for it. It's not safe. I think you have an obligation to keep us safe and to make good decisions for Middletown for the long haul. And that's what I urge you to do. Please consider this fully before we're back here under different circumstances. Thank you very much.
Two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1 more standing, 9. 10. Where he's got a battery back, he's got a battery dead here. Wait a second. Gentleman in the back in the striped shirt, just in the line. Very good. We'll go to the clock, everyone. 12 o'clock, I'm shutting down the clock. Okay? So you get about 4 minutes apiece. And I, again, the last lady, I'm not going to pick on her, but you went over and over and over saying the same thing. Cut yourself short on that. Go ahead. Quick, I'll give you a signal that time's up. So.
You've been on 4, sir, right? Your name and address?
My name is Jim Mulvaney, Mulvaney. I live at 3 Seneca Drive. I've been a resident of Chapel Hill for over 20 years. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Gorman, planning members, thank you for letting the public speak. Let me say that, please believe that the vast majority of us that oppose this project.
Next up.
Oh, okay.
in 1 minute. So the application that's listed after this, that's Maya Marina, is asking to be carried to what date? Can you give it the date? July 2nd. So if anybody's here on the next application, that's not going to be heard tonight. It's going to be carried without further public notice to July 2nd. I didn't. Well, I think there was somebody else who's also being postponed to that night. I don't know. I'm sorry. I think the board will make every effort to hear all the applications on July 2nd. What order?
Because we understand how many of them delayed. Push back and push back. You will get certain matters that evening as well. I hope we just, yes, you will.
So the affidavit of publication, the affidavit of service of order is being carried to July 2 without further public.
Thank you. No, as I was saying, most of us do express our opinion in a respectful, professional manner, and I hope you will ignore others. I'm just going to make two points. That despite the Jackson Holdings case, as mentioned, that 16801 is the law of the land, as I understand it, and I believe that this project fails dramatically to meet two of the tests of 16801, and that's it. B9 of 16801 states that there should be consideration to the standards, principles, and objectives of the master plan, and I think this project in no way complies with the master plan. That plan recommends adopting the McLeese Creek recommendations, which would change the zoning of this particular parcel of property from the R90 to R220, which is 5-acre minimum, thereby implying a recommended density of 1 family per 5 acres. That's a family of 4, that's less than 1 person per acre. The proposed school, based on the applicant's own testimony, is that there'll be an approximate density of 13 persons per acre. That may be less dense than other schools, but it is 13 times the recommended density of the master plan. And of course, this is completely at odds with the designation of Chapel Hill Road as a scenic road. Moving on, it's been stated numerous times over the past several months that the fact that local residents do not want this school is not sufficient reason to deny the application. We understand that. On the other hand, the fact that a handful of residents from outside Middletown do want the school is not sufficient reason to approve it. B5 of 16801 states that there must be a demonstrated need for the facility. I believe that there is zero need for an all-girls Catholic high school in Middletown or Monmouth County. Middletown does not have an all-girls Catholic school. Middletown does not have a Walmart. We don't need a Walmart. We can shop at Target. We don't need an all-girls Catholic school. We can educate our children at modern-day prep, RBC, or St. John Vianney. We don't need to provide schools in every conceivable specialty that someone can dream of. Somebody may want it, but that doesn't mean that there's a need for it. I believe that 2 of these provisions in 16801 are not met, and I believe that that is sufficient to vote no on the application. Thank you very much.
Did you meet up before?
Yes, I have.
Your name and address.
Teresa Marino, 6 Iroquois Drive, Middletown, New Jersey. I'm a Chapel Hill resident. In fact, I live right off of Chapel Hill Road in Mohegan Drive and will be directly affected by the proposed location of the school. I have lived here for 17 years. Before coming here, my husband Tom and I lived in New York. We chose to live here and raise our family. We chose this specific location because of the beauty, tranquility, safety, and sense of family. And we truly love it here. I am concerned that all of this is going to change. First of all, let me state that I am Catholic. We have sent both of our daughters to St. Mary Elementary School, so I am a proponent of Catholic education. I would like to make it very clear that I am not against Trinity Hall School. I am against the proposed location of Trinity Hall School. I have a few friends whose daughters currently attend Trinity Hall School. I wish them well, and I hope they do really great. However, I'm here to implore the board to reject this current application to build the school in Chapel Hill Road. And I won't go on and on because everybody has stated about the traffic and about the site distance. I am concerned that if a turning lane is put in to the entrance of the school, when I leave Mohican Drive, as I do on a daily basis to go to work and to go to school, I won't be able to see the cars coming on the opposite side of the road, heading down towards Route 35, if I need to make a left. I'm very concerned about that. In fact, currently, my student's bus driver has moved the location of her bus stop on the first day of school in September. Her bus stop is listed on her bus, on her bus pass as Chapel Hill Road and Mohican Drive. He told her and the other students that stay there, it's way too dangerous. He moved the stop to the corner of Iroquois Drive and Mohican Drive so that it was safer for them. I'm also concerned that once cars start queuing up in the turning lane and even waiting to go straight down Chapel Hill Road towards Kings Highway East, they're going to start using Comanche Drive, Iroquois Drive, and Mohican as a cut through to go around traffic to try to get to the school or to get to Kings Highway East faster. That, I think, will be a dangerous situation. I'm also concerned about the noise that this school will create for their sporting events and after-school activities. The school would be located in a valley. That farm is a valley. Noise travels very far. I know that the school has stated in the past, their experts have testified, that there are no plans for for sound systems. You don't really need sound systems to hear the noise from these sporting events. At all events I've been to at other schools, they use bullhorns, megaphones, whistles, the crowd is cheering. The track is going to be built very close to Chapel Hill Road. That noise will travel over. In addition, you don't need a permanent sound system to bring in sound. I've been at track meets, at CBA as one example, at Modern Day, where they not only bring in a DJ, they have radios, and the music is really loud. So I'm concerned about the noise. So just in conclusion, I'm just stating that Chapel Hill is a beautiful, bucolic, and peaceful neighborhood of residential single-family homes. It's one of the very few remaining areas of Middletown with such natural beauty and tranquility. Trinity Hall, in my opinion, does not satisfy the requirements for a R90 zone conditional use because it will cause traffic hazards, traffic congestion, and significant noise. In addition, it is incompatible with the surrounding neighborhood. This school is not needed here. Thank you for your time.
Did you do that before? No. Please, your name and address. Please raise your hand. Your testimony about to give forward, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, God. Thank you.
I am a 22-year resident of Middletown. I live on Winnebago Way, which is on the corner of Highway East. And I am very much for the school. I think it actually will improve our property values because I'd much rather have a beautiful green park, green school, that is extended to a beautiful wood area, and instead of having like more houses, we have also houses. I also think that it's great because the schools really do work with people and the neighbors. I was on the board of trustees for Montessori, and we moved from Hillsville to Shrewsbury, to White Road, 2 lanes, and I went through all this planning, and the schools were out of their way to make sure that the traffic flows and works. And I actually think that as a close by neighbor, this actually make my street safer. Because on Kings Highway, there's tons of traffic going, and they go fast. So by having the school there, they'll go slow down. And what they're going to do to improve Chapel Hill Road will make it much safer too. Plus, I think it's a great idea for the community, because Middletown was the top 10 towns back in, with money back in the 1990s. To have another private school dedicated to all girls is fabulous. We have CBA, which is over the last years as a reputation. It would be wonderful that Middletown also have the same thing for all girls school. So, like I said, I represent my family. I have a 7th grader who I would love to daughter, I listen to her there. And also my neighbors who couldn't be here tonight because they have no kids. But they all day talk about their daughters. They would love to be able to have that school near us and send it to them. So I really thank you.
Your name and address?
Lee Bugsby, 37 Stone Road.
And you've been sworn before?
So I live directly in the southwest corner of this property that's being proposed to be developed. I'm literally downhill, so today, as currently planned in phase 1, I'm 350 feet away. I'm in the direction of where the noise would be generated and directed towards. Then when phase 2 goes in, I would be at literally 200 feet from the end of the building or whatever. And so one of the questions, or one of the issues that came up many times tonight was about water. We see a lot of that issue. So what we've heard in the past few months is that building runoff was going to be put into shallow driveways. The other thing that we heard was that the surface runoff from the roads and parking lots was going to go into the retention basin. Now, as perhaps maybe some of you have talked to the environmental commission or whatever, there's a layer of clay impermeable to water that lies underneath that ground, all the way across most of the building. When that water goes into the shallow wells and the retention basin, it's going to go sideways. It's going to go down and hit that impermeable barrier and come downhill towards all the neighbors south, downhill from that location. So we've heard a lot of people about saying things about being green. So what I would ask is a condition, if you were to go forward with this proposal, is to put a condition on these shallow wells and retention basins, either punch through the impermeable clay so that you can allow the water to circulate to the substrates, go back down to deeper parts of the earth. Or actually, perhaps if the Trinity Hall cases were actually a deep green, they could go with geothermal wells in those locations that we're talking about. That would punch several hundred feet down, it would drop their tubes, it would backfill it, and that would allow the water to percolate down. It would also take a lot of the sound away, but most of those, the way it works is there's just circulation pumps that are usually put into the basement of most buildings, circulates the fluid that goes through those pipes into the ground and back up winter and summer. So a lot of the noise requirement for air conditioning would be reduced, and you would have very little noise from that location, and you would probably solve a lot of the water issues. So if you don't approve, I don't really think this is the right location for this building, so I put away most of the other part. If you do move forward with it, I would ask you to put a condition on the water issues and some of these solutions. Thank you.
Have you been up before?
Yes.
Your name and address.
Lisa Johnson, and I live at 263 Chapel Hill Road. I just wanted to let you know, from my own experience, a few serious accidents that happened. One was in my front yard. We had a rollover of a teenager coming down the street, and where we live, it gets very narrow. And he was flying down Chapel Hill Road, and he ended up doing a rollover in my front yard. Another instance was when my two older children started elementary school. We did receive a bus pass, and they wanted my children, the Board of Ed wanted my children to go up to Mohican. And I told them that there's no sidewalks, there's no way for my children to get up there without having to cut through the neighbor's yards. So they came and they observed the area, and they said, yes, it's a very dangerous road, so we'll have the school bus stop and pick up your children. So the school bus stopped, and at least twice a week, people would run right through the school bus stop sign. So I called the Middletown police. Yeah, when they put the arm out and they say stop, they kept all over. And I called the Middletown Police Department and they set up a watch and they caught a few people actually doing that right in front of them. So it's crazy. It's a crazy road. We live 3 driveways up from Whippoorwill Valley Road. We've lived there for about 13 years. I grew up in Middletown. I've always ridden horses and had farm animals, and the reason we bought this house was because there was a little extra property so that we could have farm animals and our horse. And needless to say, I've ridden my horse a few times down Chapel Hill Road, just that short little area to go over the bridge and get onto Whippoorwill. I have to take a crop and say, move away from my horse. I mean, people are just like this, crazy. And it's the same thing when people are on bicycles, or I don't take my children on the road if we don't go biking, and I don't ride the horse on the road. So I just wanted to give you a personal perspective of what will happen if you have so many more teenagers on the road. So I know it sounds funny, but it's not, because I live there and see it every day. We had to put a fence out front to stop people from just driving around in our driveway. It's a nightmare. So I don't know, the road hasn't changed in 60 years from when it was converted to a dirt road. I mean, where I am, it's still really narrow, and I don't see how you could make the road wider or safer where I am. There's no sidewalks unless you did eminent domain, or I don't know. The neighbor next door to me, actually 273, which some other gentleman brought up, he actually owns part of Chapel Hill Road, Mr. Jordan. So, yeah, he's not there anymore. His house has been for sale for 3 years. But he moved here about 70 years ago, and at that time it was dirt roads, and then they did pave it, and he actually owns like 10 foot of Chapel. So that's all I wanted to say, and thank you. And I really hope you will know, please.
My name is Rudy Rubito. I live on 333 Chapel Hill Road, directly across from where
You've testified. You've testified. I think you disconnected. No, we'll fix it.
Why don't you use this temporarily, and I'll see if I can do it.
WOBITO. I'll try to make this brief. By the way, I want to compliment the board on the great job you're doing in fairness. And I understand that you did great.
You're not being picked up by either.
Excuse me? I just want to compliment you on the quality job you guys are doing.
You don't want to help, right?
We'll talk about that. Everything that's been said, you just repeat it all, but when everybody's repeating the night, I'm a little tired just to go to the plane. You can hire experts for testimony, pay them for the night, and then you basically testify on anything. The true experts, I think, are in this room. We live on Chapel Hill Road in this neighborhood, and we live it. And we can't move our homes, but an applicant can move the site they wish to develop. We don't have a choice. That's number one. Going back with the master plan, he wants some more information. I knew Judy Stanley very well, may she rest in peace. She was a champion of open space. She was very much into the master plan and trying to make Middletown a quality place to live. She was contemplating, the master plan to rezone properties with a much lower density. And many applicants at that time got wind of it, and they immediately went for approval. That being said, I own a piece of property also directly adjacent. I live across the street, but I also own 19 acres adjacent to the property that's being subdivided. I have horses there, and I have fencing, and if you dig down certain times of the year, you go down a foot or two, there's water. On a dry season, you go down 3 feet, there's water. My main horse field is 5 feet above the people that live behind my property on Arrowhead. I have an elevation, I have a grading plan. That 90% of that particular lot, because I own 3 lots contiguous, was put into a Middletown conservation easement. At that time, Middletown was very, very strong about protecting the McLeese Creek and the Navesink Basin. And that's why a 24-acre piece of property only got 4 lots out of it, because of the conservation easements and the interpretation of, at that time, the master plan and what the town's intentions were to limit density and water runoff in that area. The people on Stavola Road, they're waterlogged. And regardless of how well I know a little bit about construction, I'm not an expert, but I can tell you a recharge system can only recharge if the water can flow out of it. So I really feel it's incumbent upon our engineers to really review those soil test borings with a lot of scrutiny. And other than that, I can also say, regardless of the improvements along Chapel Hill Road for widening and the entrance for ingress and egress, we still have an 18-foot wide bridge by Whippoorwill Valley Road. And that has guardrails, so that means it's probably 17 feet wide. And if you go by there and there's a truck coming through, and if you're not aware of it, you cannot pass when a big truck comes through. You have to yield to that truck, slow down, and let the truck come through. And people don't consider that. If they're not familiar with the road, they just come plowing through, and you're on your own. And that is not going to be changed. So regardless of how wide you make it, it's basically like an hourglass. It's going through a little hole. That's why it takes an hour for the sand to go from the top to the bottom. That's not going to change. I also want to say this. Mr. Junko and several of his gentlemen that were giving testimony said on 2 or 3 occasions, and it was even written in the Independent the last time I looked, that from Hayes Court up to Kings Highway, it was going to be widened. And I heard no one challenge that statement. It was said, I heard it was going to be paved, not widened. And it was, so I'd like to get a correction on that to see what the story is. Is it going to be widened or just paved? From Hayes Court up to Kings Highway, it's going to be widened?
Well, from Kings Highway to the end, to the property.
It's going to be widened?
Widened and repaved.
I don't think that's possible. That's another flawed testimony. Have you been there?
No.
No, I don't think so. What do you mean, come on? Okay? I'm telling you, it can't be done. There's a drop-off there that's unbelievable, and you'd be taking people's land. Okay? It's not going to be, you only said initially it's going to be paved.
What you're doing here,
It's my turn, I couldn't say anything.
Easy, you can take time here.
Okay.
But you can't tell him or his engineer what they can and cannot do. You're not an engineer.
Okay. I just wanted a correction as far as what was true.
They're coming from Kings Highway East, that intersection, all the way down to the edge end of their property. That's what they are paving and widening using the easements that are there for the road. They're taking nobody's property. If that's what happens,
That's on the record.
That's on the record.
All right. There's one other issue that I have. I went to the Sewage Authority to see Mr. Ray Nearstead. I asked him about how the Trinity Hall School is going to have sewage. It's a non-sewage zone. The sewer easement is along the edge of my property and the Conway's property. So the only way to possibly connect then is to have an easement through the adjoining property to connect to the sewer main, which goes into a pumping station. Now, the pumping station on Sleepy Hollow, and there's also one along Route 36, is consistently failing. Check with some of the retailers on the highway. Okay. I had asked him, what if, how can you give them sewage and without possibly improving the pumping station? So he says to me, well, we haven't gotten any calculations of how much water, how much is going to be coming into the sewer, number one. And I said to him, what happens if they have to put in new pump stations, larger ones, to handle it? Who pays for that? Yeah, I didn't get an answer, but
The answer is simple.
Yes.
The answer is
The taxpayers?
everybody that's within, that's serviced by that sewer.
Listen, I'm done. Thank you for everything.
Okay.
That has been addressed by the sewer area. They're actually going to have to do a separate study if it gets approved, and it has to be verified. It is.
Name and address, please.
My name is Barbara Casson. I live at 821 Tilton Place.
You've been up before?
No, I have not.
You don't mind? As far as testimony about the board, the truth, the whole truth, and the truth, we got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm not going to read what I wrote. I'm going to keep it new stuff. I want to make a point that Chapel Hill Road is utilized by our public school district top administrators. The administration building is located there at the corner of Leonardville Road and Hosford. Hosford becomes Stillwell zigzags over, it becomes Chapel Hill Road, which is Oak Hill, which is Van Hall, right? It's got an identity crisis in the road. But I know because I volunteer with a couple of committees that are district level, that a number of our top administrators use Chapel Hill Road to get to and from. I'm fearful of what, to and from work. I'm fearful of what phase one or any construction or any additional traffic will do to that. I personally drive one of my children to Bayshore Middle School, which of course I have to utilize Chapel Hill Road to get to Bayshore Middle School. I see many people who do that. It's a school of about 700 students in the public school system. There was also an incident a few years back where a Boar's Head delivery truck hit one of those poles on Chapel Hill Road. I saw that truck for years drive around with that dent. That wiped out the phone system, possibly the computers too. I know definitely, pretty sure the phone system at my child's elementary school over on Cooper Road. Fairview Elementary School is there. So I have some concerns about adding risk, adding traffic, and how it will impact the vast majority of public school students in the area. In addition to what other people have already said about the bus lines that travel and utilize Chapel Hill Road. I was actually the lady that got the transportation department to move that stop from Tilton Road and Chapel Hill Road down into the neighborhood to make it safer. The only other comment that I think nobody else has made is that there is a part of Chapel Hill Road, it is beyond 233 Chapel Hill Road and but before you get to Independence, or before you get, it's on that side of the road, that I call the weeping part of Chapel Hill Road. There are springs, you've heard about all of those water conditions. There are springs right there, and Public Works used to come out all the time from my backyard. I can see that part of Chapel Hill Road. And I would write down, they're out there again, there's tops, they're blocking the road there to deal with this wet, it was wintertime and it ices over. Now, Public Works did do something a couple of years ago to to alleviate a lot of the problems. But it is starting to come back. I've noticed, with our wet winter and our rains that we've had recently, it's becoming a weeping road again. And that's just a part of anybody coming from, you refer to it as south, I really think of it as the west part. Most of it goes north-south. But anyway, from Route 35, you would have to travel that part. And it's just a hazard, and it's dangerous. And like I said, I take a kid to Bay Shore, and I see these girls. They're wonderful girls. I go through Croydon, I see them all the time. Have beautiful daughters. They're a gift, they're full of potential. Don't think that the parents truly understand that even though it's a pastoral setting where they want to put the school, the actual road is not made to even accommodate what it has right now. 40 miles per hour is too fast. I would argue it should be 35 from start to finish and not go up to 40 after Sleepy Hollow. My fear is that if you guys approve this, if they entice more families to come and put their daughters in this school, the signs that we're going to remember are not only the signs that you see that say stop the development, but there are some new signs on Chapel Hill Road. They're white signs, they have green printing on them, and they say new sections, space available, and they're for spots at Mount Olivet Cemetery. I don't want those.
Okay, well, we hope.
I'm not touching good.
But could you leave your name and address, please?
Okay, Michael A. Katz, K-A-T-Z, at 22 Jefferson Street, Middletown. I promise to tell the truth, I do not swear.
Okay, you affirm? Can you affirm? You affirm that you're going to tell the truth to the board?
I promise to say anything I say is the truth.
I think the word is affirm.
Affirm.
Okay? Thank you.
You know the things I like.
That's okay.
This Trinity School, I think the people, I understand it's a $15,000 to $17,000 school, and to be able to send your children there, you're doing well for yourself, and you want your children to do well. I have 3 young children, 9, 5, and 4 months. I understand I want the best for them, and I will go any lengths to get them that best. But I'm not quite sure. We've heard quite a bit in the last couple of months. We heard about the roads, the creek, the water table line, the net, the decibel levels, everything. Maybe this isn't the exact place for you. I also understand in rumor that they're ready to sue if the vote comes in no, sorry. Don't know if that's true, but that's what I've heard. I don't understand why you take the resources to do that versus just pick up and find any number of buildings that we know in this area, from Holy Family to the building at 114, by 114 exit that's available. Colesnet, which has lots of land. I just don't think it's for this area. I hope that this master plan I've heard is a master plan, not a flip-flop plan. Otherwise, why do we take the time to make master plans and rules and regulations and this, don't do this? I know you're going to know the facts. I mean, I don't know what gains or losses, and told everybody here in this room has. I think these people get their daughters excellent education wherever they may land. I just don't think it's Chapel Hill Road. Chapel Hill Road? That's the countryside of Middletown. I like to see it stay the countryside of Middletown. It's a beautiful side of Middletown. I take my kids through there, see the horses, the sheep, trees, come to the west side of 35, you see the houses, up here, up there. I mean, my son didn't understand it was more than the Homedale Park until I showed him the back of Middletown. and to develop it in such a way, I just don't see it benefiting, especially the people who live here and stuff, take the ground. I've lived here 40 years. My parents moved here from Brooklyn. I could have moved, my wife's from California, could have moved to California with her. I stayed here, she stayed here too. She likes it. It's a place to live, it's a place to grow. Some things, I mean, you want to add this school, this town is becoming the hub of Catholic schools. And if that's the case, I think my people need a place too. A Shiva might be really nice around here. They got the money for lands and the houses and whatever they need. So, this would be a good place for schooling. I don't know. But I hope people go to this thing. Just for the sake of facts and rules, the master plan to all the way down to the way these people feel. And these people will get their education. They will. But there's so many places they're in that can be built. And use that money. Instead of building them, just refit. Just refit. And save your money. More teachers, more computers, more this, more that. Do so much more. Instead, just, you know what, everybody wants a big rubber ducky. I understand what Chapel Hill is. New school, staking their flags around. But use that money, use it for the education. Maybe you'll get a tax deduction if you go to a building that's everything. I don't know. I just want to thank you all for the last couple of months for listening to this. And I hope if kids do, if this is approved, the kids drive down that road, that they survive that road. Because you all, I know you will. So thank you, gentlemen, ladies. Have a good night.
Have you been up before, sir?
No, I have not.
Your name and address, please.
Yes, my name is Gerald Beaver, B-E-A-V-E-R. I live at 5 Edgewood Court in Middletown.
Can you please raise your right hand and swear testimony that the board will hold you until the so we got?
Yes, thank you. Basically, I mean, everybody's better. We're all tired. I have just a couple of concerns. We all know the Chapel Hill Road. We've all talked about the 4-ton bridge. And, you know, my concern is the emergency access road on Stavola. Stavola has not had any traffic studies done. It is a windy, I mean, it's not the type of road that should be used as a thoroughfare. I think we all agree with that. But my concern is looking at everything that's going on, looking at the congestion at the entrance of the new proposed school. My concern is that emergency exit becomes a primary exit. And now you're dumping traffic through the school on the Stavola that just simply can't handle it. The neighborhood has seen a turnover of young families over the last few years, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with the street. But you know, most of the houses are set back, large yards in the front, kids playing every day, and I mean a lot of young kids, more than ever. And it would just, you know, it would really increase the safety risk to those young kids through traffic constantly going through that, along with the construction traffic. I mean, it baffles me, you know, how with the 4-ton bridge limit there, and all the structural steel and all the concrete trucks and the block and everything, how all this stuff is going to transverse into that thing with only one exit. You know, they had a situation like this with Monmouth Regional. Monmouth Regional has a back exit that dumps into a community there. For a while it was open and the residents fought to get it closed. Now it's open a certain part of the day. I would just ask that if this does go through, that you people address that wisely and deal with that. The other thing, about concern, obviously, is what everybody's talking about with the water. I mean, these engineers are going to have a real challenge. They are. We all know that. I mean, anybody that lives along Lee's Creek, all our neighbors, just a normal rainfall. And just a normal rainfall, we have tremendous amounts of water, all coming from Garyford down, converging there from that new developing Garyford. It's going to be a challenge to their engineers. That's the reason we're all concerned about this drainage. And when I listened to the engineers, originally it was a drainage system designed for 20-family houses that now, I mean, it's the indiscrepancies that makes me concerned. I mean, I know you guys are gonna do your best, but, let's just hope that all that stuff gets taken care of. Another thing is the sewer, and it was addressed earlier. I mean, nobody talks about these things. Nobody talks about the electric, nobody talks about the sewer. I mean, I have a sewer easement that goes through the back of my property. I'd love to know how these people are gonna do the sewer lines. It's very interesting to me. I know that my neighbor's the last in the sewer, and he's between me and the development. I mean, they would literally have to dig right through our backyards if anything ever need be. And that's a concern to us. Really, out of what everybody's talked, those couple items are right now are my major concerns. I can only ask that you would address those in the event that this plan would go through. I know you guys are tired of mine. I want to thank you for your evening. Right?
Good? Okay, we're done with the public portion. We're down to summations. You're up first. Mr. Gazarovski.
In view of the hour and in view of the court orders hour, we would ask that the summations be as brief as possible, we can keep them to 10 minutes or so, and hit the high points. About 10 minutes. About 10 minutes. I gave you a number.
Ron.
It's the wrong number.
All right, 5 minutes.
At the very beginning of this meeting, Mr. Balfour, part of the board, and Mr. Jocko.
The mic's not picking, you have to put it up higher.
You can come over here and hand out.
Okay. That's how it works. At the very beginning of this meeting, there was an acknowledgement by the board, as well as by Mr. Gorman, that the plans that were prepared by the applicant with regard to the ingress and egress to the site were incorrectly prepared. There was a mistake. I read the transcript from the last hearing, and to a certain extent, I think the board was kind of unfairly picked on because of his methodology. But he was right. The ingress and egress was in fact dislocated, and Mr. Jocko very clearly stated, well, we're going to change it, and we're going to make it so that it is exactly opposite the driveway on the opposite side of the street. Well, we come here this evening, and it was pointed out to Mr. Jocko, confirmed by the board's professionals about the mislocation, and his position was, well, I'm not going to redesign that driveway so that you can see it. I want you to either approve the plan as it is, or I want to make that a condition of the approval, and we will submit those plans at a later date to the board engineer. Well, that really takes it out of the public forum. It takes it out of the ability of the concerned citizens to review those plans, have them looked at by their experts, and comment upon them. I would object to that procedure. Going forward, I recently was in court on a very involved land use case before Supreme Court Judge in Trenton, Mercer County, Judge Jacobson, on a very complicated case, and she read an opinion into the record that took about an hour. And as I listened to it, I thought I was back in law school listening to a very profound lecture by a professor. I didn't understand it then, I didn't understand it from Judge Jacobson, but at the very beginning, or rather the end, she said, you know what? Land use is really about common sense. And really, that is what this application is about. This is an application about common sense, about the placement of this large facility on this country road in a rather tranquil area of Middletown. So, my argument to you is going to be that we have to talk and think in terms of what is common sense. And you really and truly are the board to hear that. You know, some of us do trial work. Usually when we're younger attorneys, we do trial work. We appear before a jury. And now you walk into a courtroom, you see a jury, you pick a jury, you don't really know what you're going to get. You may have a very complicated case that you have to explain, and you're before a group of people who come from disparate walks of life. Some are educated, some are less educated, some have common sense, some don't have common sense. But you are a very specialized board, a specialized jury, because many of you have served on this board for perhaps 10 or 20 years, some for a lesser period of time. But all of you have heard a number of land use cases. All of you have heard cases involving variances, cases involving site plans. So the advantage that an attorney has in appearing before you, who he believes has the facts on his side, is that you will understand the case. And you, in fact, have listened to this case very carefully, very patiently, and whether you agree with my position or not, I believe that you understand what this case is about. And oftentimes, you know, people make comments about this being a done deal or whatever it may be. I really don't believe that for 1 second. I've been appearing before many boards. I've appeared before this board 30 years ago when Ms. Stanley was the board chairman. Middletown has the advantage of having a citizenry made up of people who are decent, hardworking, honest, and intelligent. And you are all community activists. You are on this board because you want to be on this board. You are on this board because you want to preserve what is basically what's the good things about Middletown, whether it's your educational system, whether it's your fire department, your police department, your maintenance of your roads, and your desire to preserve open space. And the person most typified that, perhaps, as you remember her, was Judy Stanton. And as a younger attorney, I appeared before her many times representing buildings. And she really was a tiger about that. So we're talking here about an area in Middletown which by all definitions is one of the few remaining pristine areas in the community. We talk about the Cleves Creek, we talk about the Manager Plan. All of those plans talk about preserving the integrity of this roadway. So when you look at that, you then listen to the people who have stood before you for the last 4 hours and given really testimony. Well, they are your community. They are the people who live in that area. They are the people who drive on Chapel Hill Road every day of their life. They are the people who drive their children. They are the people who have young daughters and sons who drive on that road. They are the people who experience the flooding in the backyards of their property. They're the ones that you have to listen to. You are, in fact, the conscience of the community. You are here as public representatives to listen to what they have to say about the impact that this facility or this use will have upon their quality and their way of life. Now, what I find interesting, and I respect those people who speak in favor of the application, but none of them have in any way rebutted the comments of the residents of the Chapel Hill area who spoke about the dangers of the traffic. the flooding and things of that sort. You know, they are good people who speak in terms of wanting to have a girls' high school, which I understand. I understand there's a group of people who are, let's say, the creators of the school, and their intentions are obviously pure. We all believe in the best education for our children. But you know, there's nothing wrong with the public education either. And one of the real questions, which I think has never been discussed before you, is why is there a need for this private school in this area of the community? When you looked at the feasibility study, which was prepared by this group for presentation to the diocese, we're speaking in terms of drawing people from perhaps 27 surrounding communities. How is that reflecting or satisfying the need in your particular community? Is there a need in your community in this area for a private school? I would submit to you respectfully that there is not. You know, there's been reference to this feasibility study, which quite frankly was presented prepared in the year of 2011. And what I found interesting when I first became involved in this case is that that study was not a part of the record, not part of the documents that were submitted to this board for their consideration. And when I listened to all of the testimony of all of the applicant's witnesses, none of them referred to that feasibility study, and I really couldn't quite figure that out. There was then a letter sent by Mr. Jonko, which I think after it was sent, it was sort of like withdrawn, but he made an interesting comment in that letter. And he said, the applicant conducted a comprehensive feasibility study which confirmed the need for and potential viability of an all-girls school facility in the Monmouth County area. As of this date, Trinity Hall is the only all-girls independent school available in Monmouth County. Well, let me just say this first of all, going to the last comment first. You know, maybe there's a reason why there is not an all-girls school in Monmouth County. First being, there's not a need for one. Secondly, when we speak in terms of this saying that there is a feasibility study which supports this application, that is just simply untrue. When you read the feasibility study, what it really says to you, if in fact this school goes forward, it's going to have possibly a deleterious effect upon surrounding girls' schools in the county or in the area. There is nothing in that report which speaks affirmatively about the need for such a school and or its viability. In addition to that, as was pointed out, when that report was prepared, it referred to a location in Lincroft, a distance away from this present location, a distance away with regard to the road systems and or the like. Lincroft, where CBA is located, is not a tranquil country road. It is across from Brookfield College. It is surrounded by commercial uses. That is not Chapel Hill Road. It just simply is not. So if we go through the feasibility study, we find out that it was presented to the Diocese of Trenton. We've introduced and marked as an exhibit a letter from the bishop, which says basically, from our perspective, we cannot agree to calling this a Catholic Girls' High School because we feel it will have a possible negative effect upon other surrounding schools. And you certainly have the right and the ability to have a private school if you like, but it does not receive the imprimatur of the Diocese of Trenton. You know, and I have to say that I compliment the bishop for his candor because he says, you have the right to make an application to do this. However, you don't have our approval. Just as this applicant has the right to come before you and say, we want an approval to build this girls' high school. And they have that right. It's been pointed out repeatedly that this is listed as a permitted or a conditional use in the zone. And I want to get to the last part of my comments and respond specifically to that. Now, there's reference being made to a reported case, but the fact of the matter is that in your master plan, you very clearly say how the intended use of this property is to be. It speaks in terms of rezoning it to a zone much greater than the R90 zone. It speaks in terms of the fragility of the slopes, the wetlands, and or the lake. It refers to the importance of the McLeese Creek study. It says all of those things. But then, more importantly, it goes to what you got to show to put such a use on this property. And let me just, for 1 second, refer to my notes, and more specifically, section 16-801, which refers to guiding principles and general provisions. Now, you know what? I listened to a comment earlier about what one of the professionals said or didn't say at the first meeting, but we've gone beyond that. The objector presented an expert witness who specifically took you through not only the feasibility study of the applicant, but also took you through the zoning ordinance. And it says very clearly, in acting upon an application for conditional use approval, and that's what this is, the municipal agency, meaning you, the planning board, shall be guided by the following standards and principles. Subsection B then says, the design, arrangement, and nature of the particular use is such that the public health, safety, and welfare will be protected, and that reasonable consideration is afforded to the following. Now, what I found somewhat interesting about this case, and I've done a lot of in these cases, there was no pending testimony by the applicant with regard to this, no testimony showing the satisfaction of those various conditions. Now, I didn't make those conditions up. The citizens surrounding it didn't make those conditions up. Those conditions were made up by the governing body. The governing body is the legislative branch of your government. More importantly, they are the people who are elected by the residents of this community. They are the people who create zoning ordinances which are designed to protect the residents of this community. Now, it may very well be that a well-intended group of people who do not live in Middletown, and I don't think that's a bad thing, want to have a school on that site. And they want to make it available to children or girls who live in the surrounding communities to come into Middletown to attend this site. But in order to do that, they have to satisfy the spirit of these guiding principles and general provisions, and I would submit to you that they have not. Running through them briefly. Number 1 says, the suitability of the particular property which is subject to an application for conditional use. Well, why is this particular property located in an area completely surrounded by residential homes suitable for this use? This is not an urban setting. This is in a setting such as in whether it be Elizabeth or wherever it may be, where you have churches and or schools located immediately adjacent to residential homes and residential communities. That was accepted. Because that was the way people at that time lived. There's a place for a school in a town such as Middletown, but it's certainly not in this area. Number 2 says the compatibility of the proposed uses and or structures within the existing neighborhood. How is the size of this building? The soccer fields, the tennis courts, the outdoor athletic fields, the number of buses coming onto the property, the square footage of the building, taking up of impervious surface, whatnot. How is that compatible with the surrounding uses? How is that compatible with basically the farms and pastures and whatnot who live in this idyllic setting which has been specifically maintained by your community for the last 100 years? I mean, everything in Middletown has been about, in all of these projects coming forward, maintaining the integrity of that area. The last application that was before this board dealing with this property didn't deal with 26 acres, it dealt with 60 acres. It didn't deal with a very intense use, it dealt with perhaps 21 houses being spread out over an entire site. Number 3 says the potential effect that proposed use or structures will have upon property values. Now, we did in fact present an appraiser, and there was a lot going back and forth with regard to whether or not an appraiser could utilize a listing. Well, they can, and you have to use some common sense. Listening to all of this testimony, listening to all of the concerns with regard to traffic, listening to all of the concerns with regard to noise and or flooding of properties, can you really believe, using the common sense, that this project, which may span a period of 10 years with heavy-duty trucks going over roads and the like, may not have a negative effect upon property value? That's a matter of common sense. the adequacy of parking and traffic circulation, potential for traffic congestion, or creation of undue traffic hazards. Boy, now, I've listened to about 25 people who just testified before you, and each and every one of them speak in terms of traffic safety, traffic congestion on Chapel Hill Road. As an attorney who's handled many land use cases, I never have been one who has urged objectors and/or clients to have a number of people get up ad nauseum and make comments with regard to the project. I have to say that this is probably the exception. When I listened to what I really believe was the compelling testimony of Ms. Robertson, who lives across from this project, when I listened to the testimony of the next two witnesses, and listened to the comments of Pat Short, a former committee premier, I mean, these are the people who live in this neighborhood. These are the people who tell you about what they see on a daily basis. And the one thing which nobody really gave much thought to is the fact that you're going to be introducing a whole class of inexperienced drivers, young in age, onto this roadway. That's a common sense question which you have to ask yourself. I mean, you live in this community. I don't know whether any of you live in Chapel Hill, but I'm sure many of you drive on that road from time to time. This is not an anti-school movement. This is not one of these situations where you're saying, well, I don't want to have a particularly obnoxious use put onto this property. But this is good use. It's just not appropriate for this particular piece of property. Number 5, the need for such facility or use to serve the area in which it is located. Well, if anyone really believe that you're going to service the needs of that immediate neighborhood of Chapel Hill with the school, I mean, they're telling you in their feasibility study that they have to reach out to over 20 surrounding municipalities in order to get the required number of students to sustain this school. And I may have misheard, but I thought that one of the witnesses who spoke in favor of the school said that 20% of the existing class, or the class coming into Croydon Hall, were residents of Middletown. And if I'm misspeaking with regard to that, I would apologize. However, clearly, they need to draw from 25 surrounding communities, and clearly, the feasibility study says that in order to accomplish that, you're going to have to be taking students away who are presently attending other schools. That's something which is good for the community. Referring to adequacy of proposed drainage facilities, what I was really struck by is they didn't do any further borings or tests subsequent to those which were done, I believe, back in 2004. They created a different set of basins located in different areas and superimposed them over those earlier taken soil borings, and they were right on the edge of the basin. You have here an engineer who relied upon information that was 10 or 14 years old, an engineer who incorrectly testified with regard to the location of the drive house, an engineer who came before you with I thought was a totally incredible testimony with regard to this environmental impact statement. I mean, how anybody can get up and say I would do it, and they have to get any further thought to it after about 5 minutes of questions. Oh yeah, I do remember doing that now. Truly shocking. Planning for screening and whatnot, that's a problematic thing which can always be corrected. But more importantly, number 9, compliance with the standards, principles, and objectives of the master plan. Now, I realize that a master plan is really something which is a recommendation. But I know this community, and I've appeared before these boards going back before many of you even appeared or lived in Middletown. There never was a community that was more concerned about working on and preparing a master plan that protect the integrity of the land use within your community. There was never anyone more strident in doing that than Judy Staley was, and I think today has followed in that tradition. Well, look at this plan. Look at the McLean Street study. Look at what this plan will do to this area. It's really devastating. So, I think I've just about used up my 15 minutes. I tried to, did I go beyond that?
Yeah. We easily went beyond that.
Summing up. I really have a question. 3 words: common sense, common sense, common sense. It's a common sense application. You know, you've heard a lot of bluster and posturing and all the other things. You've heard from different witnesses from both sides, and obviously, you know, expert witnesses are retained to give particular testimony, but their testimony has to be based upon facts. And the fact of the matter is that district code use is just simply an overuse of this property and inappropriate for the neighborhood. And ask any neighbor, those people who live there will tell you that. Thank you for your patience. I know that there were a couple of comments by one individual who I thought that were out of line with regard to this board. I've appeared before this board on occasions, I've appeared before predecessors many times. I don't like all you guys, but you're a fair board.
I have a different point of view. I'm going to ask you to approve the application. In the first instance, I think this application is designed and was developed to present to you and the township in compliance with the applicable laws, rules, and regulations. And in order to do that, we took a look at what was then in effect, which is, and is in fact, the ordinance. And common sense is a perfect way to apply it. And the common sense that has to apply here is what is the requirement to meet the standards to gain approval. That's what I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about. And there's a lot of antics that went on throughout this. And Mr. Gazarovski just indicated that, those applicants, they paid their consultants. And I just wonder if the objector, Mr. Lewinsky, paid their consultants. But be that as it may, the first issue, of course, that I want to address is this driveway realignment issue. The applicant said we would line the driveway up across the street because it creates the most safe condition. We remain prepared to do it. This is not a rocket science issue. The exact same intersection, the exact same access is going to be relocated from our plan to where it should have been in the first place, directly across from the driveway, 65 feet, 60 feet to the north. Sounds like a giant amount of space. However, when you lay the new plan on the old plan, the southern edge of the new driveway is well on the northern edge of the one that was shown. We offered several alternatives, and if the board wants to have the presentation of the plans, we can do that. They're simple. In that instance, it turns out that the objector's engineer did in fact identify that. But I think the rest of his testimony was really in question. His methodology was peculiar. Nonetheless, we went out and examined it, and we made the statement at that meeting that it was the intention to line it up, and if it was misaligned, we would do that. Therefore, I think this is a relatively minor issue in the sense that it will be the same design, shifted so it does what all the testimony was geared to. As a result of that shift, there's going to be some slight improvements. And those improvements were identified. A little more queuing space, better sight line from Mohegan, better sight line from Trinity. The driveways that are affected have the exact same sight lines because their restrictions, as the Mohegan restriction for sight, is created on that property. The traffic has been an issue raised by all of the residents. We've heard a lot of it. The fact of the matter is that what they're describing is the existing condition. When this application was submitted, amongst other conditions and recommendations for the plan from our clients, was to do some improvements along Chapel Hill Road. The original application proposed to repave it. As the issue became obvious that there was more concern about it, our clients agreed to widen the road, agreed to provide an intersection improvement at Kings Highway and Chapel Hill so that there will be a dedicated left and a dedicated right turn there. We also are able to say that entire improvements can be in the public right-of-way or not. So that if there is any need for impacts, it's only going in land that was originally intended and has been maintained and owned by the township for purposes of the roadway. And that was part of what this application is geared for, and what the applicant did. And that was to respond to board comments and to public comments. And the first example of that was the very first evening, when there were numerous questions and issues concerning that there was inadequate parking on the site. We exceeded the ordinance standard at that point by, I believe, about 70 spaces. The neighborhood complained that it was a danger, a fear, grave concern that some of these students or parents may park in that neighborhood. As a result of that, and to take that issue in a way to demonstrate that this client, this applicant, wants to be a good neighbor, and put an additional 100 spaces on the yard, or on the site. That was done in direct response to those comments. Second thing that occurred, a board member, not the applicant, not a citizen, but the board, well, citizen too, I imagine, nonetheless, the board member said, we need an emergency fire access. Use this to hold the road. We prepared a plan, and the plan is simple. It is for emergency access only. It is proposed to be grass pavers. That means when you look at it, for the most part, it'll be grass, because they grow between the various sections of this concrete, but yet it's strong enough to support the weight of these emergency vehicles. Pedestrian access is prohibited. An emergency access signage has been proposed and will be delivered. And finally, the request included $2 with a breakaway chain so that the emergency vehicle, if it needed to gain that access, could use that access. That was not part of our original proposal because we felt that that would create a concern amongst the neighbors. However, the very issue that everyone seems to be concerned about, which is safety, as we are, is enhanced by that recommendation and a compliance to do that. There was a recommendation from the board. You know, we think you can improve your circulation on site. Change the bus drop-off, make it a one-way, do this, do that. And then we started to get concerned, collectively, about Chapel Hill Road. Our initial study demonstrated that Chapel Hill Road is now adequate to service this project. However, we provided and agreed, in accordance with the recommendations of the municipal township planning board engineer, to realign and widen Chapel Hill Road from Kings Highway East, and I'm not going far enough, to Mohican Drive. And with that, we agreed to establish a travel lane, a shoulder, a left-hand turn lane, and to adjust the profile of Chapel Hill Road in that area to further enhance safety and vision. Now, part of our obligation is to provide a reasonable access. And the case law is clear that access, off-site traffic impacts are limited review by the board, but we must provide safety. And within that, our design includes additional widening to create a northbound lane uninterrupted, the expansion of the approach to Kings Highway that I just described, with a dedicated left and right-hand turn, to align the site driveway opposite the residential driveway for block 835, which we are able and willing to do, maintaining the appropriate sight lines from Mohegan Drive, which, by the way, aligning at 65 further feet up, keeps 100% of the sight line, because they don't get any more sight from the stop distance because of the impediment at the Chapel Hill Mohegan intersection. And to enhance and clear appropriate sight lines all along Chapel Hill, including the driveways, which our clients have agreed to do by removing those that vegetation, trees, and so forth that are in the right-of-way and blocking the view. And finally, to improve the sight line at Chapel Hill Road and Kings Highway East. Each of those improvements were designed to address the very issues that have come up in front of this client's property site. We think we've exceeded what would be a standard obligation, but because of the safety concerns, our clients, too, applied common sense and said, we'll spend the additional funds. We want to make it safe. We want the neighborhood to accept us. In terms of all those off-site traffic concerns, we did address them. And in fact, Mr. Triniak's testimony was throughout geared towards the concept of creating safe and efficient access. And this becomes very important in the deliberations that you will make, because the case law and the interpretation of the duties and obligations of an applicant are made clear. And those duties do not require an applicant to be responsible for off-site traffic considerations. In fact, the case law, you've heard the Dunkin' Donuts and the Lionel case. In both of those cases, the court said no. Off-track site, state highway improvements are not a basis for a denial by the board. Notwithstanding that, our client, the applicant, applied common sense, as Mr. Gazarovski would like us to do, and made improvements nonetheless. Now, there is an issue as to whether they're safe or not. And under the El Shahir case, the safety issue has to be addressed. I think we've adequately addressed that, going beyond our standards, and provided not just a safe method, but improved it. So not only do we have safety, we now have improved access, thoroughfare, and many of these concerns are going to be alleviated, mitigated by these improvements. There's been a lot of talk about the stormwater management, water on site, the off-site impacts. Yet this application is the second time that I have been through the development of this property. And the same discussions about the stormwater, about the management and the receiving streamways, and in fact, even tonight, someone brought up a letter from 2005, all of which have been addressed. And they've been addressed in a way that was satisfactory to obtain approval for a project years ago. We have comments from the engineer, all of which are satisfying and can be satisfying. And further, we have received all of the applicable NJDEP permitting for the stormwater management, along with where the wetlands are, the dangers of the streams, and the design of the stormwater. It's been approved by the DEP. The comments made by your engineer are going to be satisfied if they are not already, because that is the standard. And we are not objecting to that. My clients are absolutely committed to the common sense, if you will, of making the improvements. So the conditions that are complained of today exist today. And it's our contention that all the improvements that are going to be provided and the stormwater management will only serve to improve those conditions. It's not going to solve everybody's problem within the whole township of Middletown, but within the immediate area and impact, there's going to be a substantial improvement. The issue we're confronted of, that's most interesting, of course, is the conditional use issue. And a conditional use is very simple, and in your ordinance is provided as a use permitted in a particular zoning district, only upon a showing that such use in specified location will comply with the conditions and standards for location and operation of such use as contained in Article 8. Now we get into the issues of the two sections that are applicable, Section 801 and Section 818. In the first instance, I have to focus on 818. 818 is specific. Its caption is for educational uses, private or parochial, elementary or secondary schools. If that is an ordinance that is directly applicable, and in an interpretation of an ordinance, we are instructed to look at the direct instruction of that ordinance and comply with it. Section 818 is specific. It is for, in our case, a private secondary school. Each of those conditions are met, and in fact, almost all of them are exceeded. But primarily, there's been a lot of talk about the density of the site. The ordinance is specific as to how to calculate the use. Our clients have suggested the largest this school could ever be would be 500 students. To accommodate 500 students, the ordinance has a particular formula that results in approximately a 24 and a half, call it 25-acre requirement for the land. Our clients are providing 37 acres. Not only are we meeting those requirements, we're exceeding them. The other standards that are applicable are the zone standards that are applied for setbacks, for landscaping, buffering, and so forth. Each and every one of those conditions are met, and many, if not most of them, particularly the setbacks of the building, are very far over and above. I think the closest the building gets to any lot line, any building gets to lot line, is 194 feet, where the standard is 50. And from Chapel Hill Road, the closest building is over 800 feet. Now, you get to section 801. 801 is subjective guiding principle. The board is not able, under the existing law, to determine whether or not that is a permissible statute, or ordinance rather. And we have guidance from the case law that would say that perhaps it is not. And notwithstanding that, and despite my worthy adversaries' comments and the comments of all the objectors, each of those conditions have been addressed in our direct testimony. And I know you want to end this quickly, but this is an important point for me. And I'm going to go through each of those points and demonstrate our compliance. In the first instance, A, use of application specifically listed as a conditional use within the zone where the property is located. A private parochial school is conditionally permitted use in the R90 zone. And this whole red herring, if you will, of McLeese Creek study and its recommendations would in no way have restricted the school. And in fact, even Tom Thomas, Ms. Lewinsky's planner, agreed that when we looked at the ordinance, it's interesting that the R220 designation of a study that wasn't quite applicable to this site permitted schools in a conditional way, the same as this particular zone. And in that ordinance, the governing body determined that R90, R220, and every one of the residential zones is suitable as a conditional zone, conditional use zone for a private or public elementary or secondary school. That is the statute. The situation exists, and that section A, we believe, is satisfied. Section B, the design and nature of the particular use is such that the health, safety, and welfare will be protected in accordance with the following. Item 1, suitability of the particular property. 1, conditionally zoned. Second, you've exceeded the size. Third, all of the utilities are available. Someone mentioned in here utility availability, but that has been delivered to this board as part of the preliminary application. In terms of, I won't mention the size. And further, this site will be, we think, 99% sure, the second largest secondary school site in Middletown. If you include Brookdale College, it would be the third. Utilities, we've identified those. And in that, there was delivered, all this information was delivered in the testimony, on the transcript one. I have the exact citations, but I can I'll just summarize it to say the utilities were identified in the testimony on 6 different references throughout the transcript. In terms of the size, that's a statutory determination that was made, an ordinance determination made by the zoning office. Second, compatibility of the use or structure within the existing neighborhood. sounds like we would like, that there, or adversaries would like to discount the fact that other schools throughout Middletown are located in a residential zone. 22 of the 25 schools are in fact located in a residential zone. 2 of the 3 that are not are on the boundary. St. Leo's being one, and Bay Shore Elementary being the second. And that information was provided to you through the transcripts 1. Also, in two different instances, and both in the first transcript. Second, our architects proposed, Ms. Maesler testified that she designed the buildings to meet the criteria of the application, which included a common architectural scheme on the campus and a color scheme in the design that would be thoughtful and aesthetically pleasing. Planners then placed it in a strategic location to have the least impact on that location for the adjoining properties. It was nestled into the ground. Again, direct testimony from Maesler. Further, the engineering testimony identifies that topography. This is a dropping site from Chapel Hill Road, and yet there's another large grade separation at the rear end of the site, if you will, or the westerly side of the site, as it drops down to those properties running on Peachwood or Peachtree Lane. Created a campus site center, made it aesthetically pleasing, landscaped it, and integrated all the facilities together. It's also been designed so that the majority of the activities will take place within the center of the site, as far away from impacts as we can make them. The pedestrian pathways to the school are interior. They're all designed and lighted, and they connect all parts of the campus. The buffers have been expanded. I've already advised that. In addition to the setbacks, there's been enhanced plantings along Peachwood and along the adjoining southerly property. Further, the applicant agreed, again, identified in the transcript, ready, no scoreboards, loudspeakers, outdoor lighting on the proposed athletic fields. That's been stated many times. It is part of what our client, the applicant, has agreed to. Further, that was reaffirmed during the cross-examination of Ms. Maesler by Mr. Cleary. 3, the potential effect of proposed uses or structures will have upon property values. This is a very peculiar situation. Our adversary presented an expert witness, not a challenge to the credibility of that witness. We, in turn, provided rebuttal testimony. The fact of the matter is that there is no credible testimony that there would be an adverse impact. However, there's, of course, going to be an impact and an effect. And I think Dr. Molliver, who we presented in rebuttal, identified a positive way for viewing this situation with regard to the density comparable to other schools, and identified that a general overall standard was not applicable, that it was necessary to do an exact study, and that of the values as they come and go. This changes by other factors than what's in the neighborhood outside market conditions, economic conditions throughout the United States, in the state of New Jersey, in Monmouth County, can affect all kinds of values. There's no evidence, credible evidence, in this record that there's an impact that's negative. In fact, the only credible testimony is that of Dr. Molliver, and as he identified that there would be a positive value. Four was the proposed adequacy of the proposed traffic circulation and parking. With regard to the parking, we exceed the standards identified in the transcript 3 and transcript 1 through several testimonies. In terms of the traffic congestion and safety, the whole plan was designed to enhance and improve safety, and that is the credible evidence that's before you. Even Mr. Lamournier did not identify an unsafe condition. I'm somewhat surprised that we're proposing improvements, but nonetheless, those improvements that we've identified are geared especially towards the idea of safety. And Mr. Kutriniak, throughout his testimony, transcript 2, transcript 3, in both instances, over 9 references in those transcripts identified he was satisfied that the design was safer than it is today and would provide adequate safety. And the study further indicated that there was not a significant incidence of accidents or auto incidents in front of this site. The parking has been expanded far beyond ordinance standards. That's been entered in the testimony throughout the transcripts. Additionally, the circulation was properly presented to the board. Recommendations were made, and those recommendations were followed. And quite frankly, I believe that made us an improvement in the area around the administrative building. And that, again, was brought in through numerous transcript references. I see at least 7 of them as to the improved circulation and its satisfaction. We already addressed the Chapel Hill improvements, but that falls under this category, and it's an issue that was addressed. 5 is another enigma, and that is the need for such a facility. Our clients conducted a feasibility study that determined there would be a need. They had 30 places available in the first year school. Those 30 places were filled. They had 50 places available in the second year class, which is scheduled to begin next fall, and those places were filled. They had more applications than they had places available, and those places are limited because of the size and scope of their current quarters. It seems to me that regardless of any other information, the very fact that the class was oversubscribed is indication that there is a need for this type of school. Now, is it an absolute need that eliminates every other class or every other school? No. This is another choice. It's a choice for the citizens. That addresses the need for such facilities to serve the area in which it's located. We had a discussion and a reference a little further in here about inherently beneficial uses. School was identified as inherently beneficial use. Middletown has set a pattern of residential, of schools being placed in residential settings. That is what is occurring here. In each instance, this is a site that is suitable because it can fit and it is fit the school, provide for adequate and extensive setbacks and buffers, and we've identified a need that is being filled by the school. It's in operation now. I think there's little doubt that this small school with the small classes will be filled. Adequacy of drainage. I think that the whole issue of soil borings and base testing and so forth has been misunderstood. Reading the transcripts, we can confirm transcript 1 and transcript 3 identify that borings were taken, and whether that some were taken a few years ago, some were taken recently to confirm, and in each instance the design is adequate. It meets the general engineering standard, and the DEP approval has issued. There's an interesting point. There's some question that perhaps the soil boring that was 20 or 50 years old may be unusable. That would be a situation if the soil had been disturbed or the ground had been disturbed. But in this instance, every boring that was relied on remains accurate because soil, as we go strata by strata, remains the same. 7, adequacy of plans for screening adverse aspects of use or structure to adjoining properties. We demonstrated in the site plan adequate buffering, adequate setbacks. The issue of sound was raised. We identified the sound generation, its source, the attenuation of that sound, and its measurement without attenuation was below an applicable standard established by DEP and incorporated into Middletown's ordinance. Again, there is close to 16 different entries in the transcripts that satisfy that need. Number 8, the adequacy of the proposed outdoor lighting. In this instance, the only outdoor lighting that's being proposed here is the safety lighting of buildings, and then the T&M requested additional lighting of the walkways. That too has been provided, again, testified to, evidence entered in the presentation. Compliance with the standards, principles, and objectives of the master plan. In our view, the master plan is intended to promote public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of present and future residents of Middletown. This facility will do that. The master plan is a guiding document. The master plan has been presented, as it is presently drawn, has been presented to the governing body. And along with that, the Please Creek study, the governing body made the decision not to proceed to change any ordinances. Rather, they kept them as the condition that we find them in today. So I suggest to you that very simply, the master plan as a guidance has given direction and has been complied with because the ordinances that flow from the master plan as determined by the elected officials remain in place. We are in compliance with that. Compliance with design standards, general submissions, and requirements and other appropriate provisions. I submit that the application is without variance. The only waiver requested was a simple waiver. We would prefer to not place sidewalk along Chapel Hill Road. However, as we stated at that time, if the board wanted it, we would do it because it's the same cost to our client to either install or you contribute to the fund. The ordinance does provide that option. 11, whether or not the proposed use represents an inherently beneficial use to society or the local community. Coventry Square versus Westwood with DGBPR, Moss Safa versus Board of Adjustment of Rumson and Rumson Country Baseball, all stand for the principle that a school is inherently beneficial, and determined by the case law. In our instance, this is clearly a school. Item C, conditional uses are required to obtain site plan approval unless otherwise specified. It was specified, we applied for preliminary and final site plan, and that application was submitted without variance to you. D, conditional uses adhere to additional standards specified for a particular use. Section 1.8, we've already addressed, we are in full compliance. And finally, item E, no use specified within this article shall be considered a conditional use unless it is specifically listed as a conditional use in the zone requirements, and it is in R90, in the ordinance, and in the schedule of permitted uses. I've already addressed item 8.18. There is one, that is the second ordinance, that is specific. There hasn't been a lot of talk about the sign, however, there is one sign permitted specifically, and we're in compliance with it. In fact, we're in compliance with each of those requirements as indicated first by the zoning officer, by the planner, and by the engineer. It's my contention that whether it's applicable or not, whether it's an enforceable ordinance or not, the provisions of Section 801 have been satisfied. Second, the provisions of Section 818 have been satisfied. I would like to comment that a site plan under case law that meets the requirements of an ordinance is entitled to an approval. In our instance, we've met those conditions. That entitlement is in the statute and is defined in a case called Leonardo versus the Township of Leonardo, where the court specifically found that a site plan that meets the ordinance is suitable and should have a basis for approval. In addition, there is a wide discretion. However, it was never intended to include a quasi-judicial power to prohibit a permitted principle or permitted use. That's the PRT under concept. That's exactly what is in front of you. A quasi-governmental agency. You have quasi-judicial powers. I think the case law is very clear that a site plan in compliance with ordinance must be approved that off-site traffic conditions will not be a basis for denial, and in those instances, I believe this application has not only met, but exceeded all of those requirements. The common sense question becomes, if we meet all the requirements that were proposed by the governing body, who said that this type of use may occur in this zone, and they specify conditions that are satisfied, and then this very applicant reacts to every specific recommendation that was made by incorporating them, I think this application not only merits approval, it deserves approval. This will be a benefit to your community. It will be a benefit to the students to go there. It will be a benefit to the residents in Middletown who are willing to, or wish to, have their children be students at this school. I think it's incumbent upon approval. I appreciate all your time and effort, and I ask you to vote yes. This is a very valuable application, and very valuable for the school and the students. I'd just like to add one thing. I had the privilege in 1966 to 1970, to come to a private, all-male school here in Middletown. It served me well, and we at CBA in those years did things for Middletown. Middletown has a benefit today from it. It had a benefit in 1966. That situation is what will develop at Trinity Hall. I ask you to approve this application.
We've reached that point in the evening where we need a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to deny the applicant, as I believe they have not satisfied the standards of 16801B.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion for approval of the applicant with the following conditions. Conditions of approval that Mr. Reedy check over the entranceway of the new area, and also one extra condition, that there be a safety officer in perpetuity for the time of entrance and exit at this junction. And the school can comply to that.
Not to confuse the board, what we need is a second for one of those two motions.
I'll make a second. There you go.
I second the motion to deny the application. I don't feel that it complies with section 8.1 in action, or 8.0.
So we now have a motion to deny that's been seconded.
And now you have to take a vote. There could be debate on that motion if the board wants to keep doing that, but I mean, but otherwise, that motion's on the floor, that's the motion to be dealt with by the board.
Mrs. Carroll?
So we're voting on the motion to deny. A yes vote is a motion, is a vote to deny.
I'm sorry, it's so late.
If you're voting to deny, you're going to vote yes.
Yes.
Mr. Davis? No. Mr. Heck?
Yes.
Mr. Cordell?
No.
Mr. Ostrander?
Yes.
Mr. Afton?
No.
Mrs. Shediots?
Yes.
Mr. Wilton?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
So we have a 1, 2, 3 to deny.
The application is